Okay. I mean, we could talk for days and days and days and days. We first bonded over horror.
Yeah.
At Cabin Fever. I remember. Actually, remember when we met each other at the Spierig Brothers film, Undead?
Yeah. Yeah, it was at the 8 o'clock screening room.
It was like, yes.
Fangoria or something had written something about it, and then William Morris let me know that they were having a screening of it. And I remember the thing about it was like the Outback guy that has like the gun with the 4 barrels, which they took from a New Zealand movie called Utu. All right.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a kind of a classic image, all right, for New Zealand cinema, but never put in that genre kind of way. Yeah. And so I was at the screening room, and you at that screening at the 8 o'clock screening room, and you introduced yourself to me.
I was so excited to meet. I remember when I was making Cabin Fever, I was trying to get it made, and I saw you at a restaurant. I think it was Birds. And I was like, Mr. Tarantino? And you were so cool. You're like, oh, man, very cool. Good on you. Go make a horror film.
Oh, I'm glad I wasn't a jerk.
No, you were so nice. And then after at that screening of Undead, I was like, oh, my movie, I'm going to have it done in 3 months. I would love to show you. And you were like, oh, I totally want to see it. And then I saw you on the street, and you pulled up your car, and you went, Cabin Fever. Gonna watch it. And I was like, he remembered, like you, and then of course when you showed up at that screening at the Los Angeles Film Festival, and you stayed for the Q&A, and then the next night, I always knew from watching your movies you loved horror movies. Like even though you hadn't made one, I remember watching them in college and thinking like, this is someone who understands blood and violence and payoff. I mean, did you grow up loving them?
Well, when we were at the Cabin Fever screening, you had a Q&A. You were going on and you were talking about like the slasher films of the late 70s, early 80s, and you were talking about famous monsters, and you were talking about Universal horror and everything like that. And then I even asked a question. And I like raised my hand and go, well, you've been talking a lot about a lot of American stuff. I mean, are you a fan of the Italian stuff? And you go, oh, don't get me started.
From the Italians, yeah.
I just didn't open up that can of worms.
I didn't know if well, I remember when we first started talking, it was like, we were talking about the font on a video box.
Yeah.
From our favorite movies, and how the rule as a kid was the larger the video box, the worse the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Like 3 on a meat hook was and they'd be like, oh, what's this little Evil Dead? This little gem.
Yeah, right, exactly. A little thorny in my box. Yeah,
thorny. I mean, like, was horror your favorite section, or one of your favorites, or just did it all go hand in hand with kung fu? Well,
it depends on what you're talking about. You're talking about like when I was a little boy or older.
Well, when you were a kid, like I mean, I got hooked as a kid when I was 3 to 5, 6 years old. That was like when I got, when I had my first shot of horror adrenaline. When did it start for you? Do you have a memory of like a first horror movie you saw in a theater, or one that was like totally forbidden that you saw on VHS?
Well, anything wouldn't have been that forbidden by the time VHS came around.
Right,
I was older. Yeah, so when I was a little kid, 3, 4, 5, really just starting to watch movies in a real way, my 2 favorite genres were horror and old classic comedies. So my favorite actors back then were Boris Karloff and Lon Chaney Jr. and W.C. Fields. And
so when you saw Abbott and Costello meet the Mummy and meet Frankenstein, that was like the combination of, it's like a kid's dream.
When I saw Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, I literally thought it was the greatest movie that has ever been made and that ever possibly will be made, because it literally was my 2 favorite things in the world put together. It was horror and it was comedy. And especially, somebody like Jerry Lewis or Lou Costello, their whole infantile shtick is to relate to the kids, because they're like these imbeciles, all right? Literally infant adults. And so you relate to them. But the thing that I noticed it in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, but then when they showed Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy, I realized that there was a theme that they carried on in their Abbott and Costello Meet the Monster movies, was the fact that, yes, there was the comedy stuff, but then when the horror stuff happened and Abbott and Costello weren't in the scene, the horror stuff was played straight.
Yes, it was a real monster.
Yeah, it was the Mummy. And then the music got scary.
The monsters never broke character.
Yeah, the monsters...
Even they weren't aware they were in an Abbott and Costello
The
movie.
monsters never broke character, and the people that they were going to kill never broke character. It was never silly, all right?
Were you a Dracula fan, or was it more Frankenstein, Wolfman? Was there a particular monster that was your favorite? Did you like Because I know obviously Dusk Till Dawn, you have such a great vampire moment.
Yeah, I think the Wolfman.
Really?
Yeah, well, I take that back. Okay, the Frankenstein monster was my favorite, but like a close second in the Aurora panels of Great Monsters of the Past. The Wolfman was a very close second. They were my Lennon McCartney. All right. I loved the image of the Mummy, but I didn't really care for the Mummy movies. They were too boring for me, especially the first one.
I had the same problem. I thought the Mummy looked really, really cool. It was an awesome character design. But it moved slow, and I was never scared of it.
Yeah, it's
also
like,
the Invisible Man.
The drawings of him were amazing. And I would even like, and more than any of the other ones, that would be the one I would pretend to be when I was at my house, because I put my little arm in a sling.
Yeah, it was easy to be a mummy. You could use toilet paper.
Yeah, and just kind of like shuffle around. Now you look at The Mummy, and it's one of the it's one of the most artistic of the Universal horror films. But as a little kid, it's very boring because he's the mummy for just a moment. And he's never that guy again. So the cheapy sequels were, they had more action in them, and I liked them more. To some degree or another, I even think Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein ended up having, to some degree or another, an effect of me as an artist, i.e. the fact that at 5, I was able to make genre distinctions. This is the Abbott and Costello slapstick comedy part of the movie. This is the Universal horror film part of the movie. And this exists here, and this exists here, and then they combine them together. So now they're combining my two favorite genres together. And I was even able to make those distinctions. That, this is this type of movie, and this is that type of movie. And this is the best movie ever made, because they put my two favorite types together.
And it influenced your storytelling.
I've been mixing and matching my favorite genres ever since I started putting pen to paper. None of my movies are just one thing. They're always like a lot of different genres and subgenres crammed into it.
It's now that I never thought of it that way, but that was one of my favorite. It was almost like the Harlem Globetrotters on Gilligan's Island.
Yeah.
The stuff where you're like, you put your chocolate in my peanut butter.
It's very much a chocolate peanut butter situation.
And then I threw in your films as well, which was like I can put in my favorite genres and do the realistic violence. I tried to blend, but I love that mixing genres.
I obviously do. I mean, but like for instance, again, going back to Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, when he picks up that nurse and lifts her over his head and throws her through that glass window and everything, she's dead.
Yeah.
That's it. It's not, hardy har har. All right? Like, you get the impression that the castle was on a mountain. She just bounced off of every rock on the way to her death.
And as a kid, you think about that.
Yeah.
Let's think about this. The Universal monsters, because they were such like the architecture for modern horror, the Mummy stays the Mummy. If they made the Mummy today, it would be the Mummy. The Wolfman would be the Wolfman. But vampires, just the concept of a vampire, Dracula, it's like that seems to be the monster that it went into the comedy genre. John Badham did it. Then suddenly it becomes Twilight. Then Interview with the Vampire. And Dusk Till Dawn.
But also, but you can't. As far as I'm concerned, you can't say Dracula without mentioning Gene Colan's Count Dracula in the Marvel Comics, which is, I think, one of the most effective Draculas that there is.
Interesting. What do you think it is about vampires, the cyclical nature of horror, that it goes out of style, but it just comes back, and it's like they get reincarnated in another form? You'd think that a monster that was first written in a book in Dracula, and then it's done in the 1930s with Todd Browning, and then the Hammer horror. What did you think? Were you a Hammer horror fan? I mean, you must have been a Hammer horror fan.
Yeah, I definitely was. But I don't think you can lump Dracula in with the other vampires. I think you need to make a dividing line. You can have a bunch of vampires, and you can have a bunch of zombies, and you can follow the rules of the genre. Or werewolves, same thing. You can follow the rules of the genre that have been placed down by other movies or other stories, or you can kind of come up with your own to some degree or another. And Bill, and sometimes, if you do it good, great. If you do it annoying, we all get mad at you, like Dan O'Bannon and Return of the Living Dead. But I think that one of the reasons why Dracula has persisted for so long, as opposed to the Frankenstein monster, as opposed to the Wolfman or the Mummy, was he was a character. He was a genuine character. Now, the Frankenstein monster could be played as a character, and Boris Karloff did play him as a character, and there's been other versions that have done that. Michael Sarrazin in the Frankenstein, the True Story TV movie, it was pretty good, actually. I'm not even a Michael Sarrazin fan, but he was actually pretty good in that. And there's been other things on it, and oddly enough, again, bringing up Marvel Comics again, they did, in the 70s, a Frankenstein monster comic book that actually gave him the voice that he has in the Shelley novel. And it's actually very interesting to read his dialogue in that. And it's a pretty good comic, actually. But my feeling is, if they were making a new Dracula movie tomorrow, and if somebody were to say, oh, God, another Dracula movie, when are they going to stop that? as far as I'm concerned, as long as you have a good actor playing Dracula, you can make a Dracula movie every year. All right, it's just a cool character for the right actor to play. An interesting thing, like the first time I ever saw Dracula in a movie was Bela Lugosi himself playing Dracula in Abbott and Costello, Meet Frankenstein. And it's the last time he ever played it, and the only time he ever played it, other than the Todd Browning movie. But it was interesting though, because when you'd watch a movie on like the 3:30 early movie on Saturday, which is when something like that would have aired.
Yeah, I remember the Saturday afternoon was for Godzilla, and then whatever monster movie could play on television.
Exactly, and they now we return you to Bud Abbott, Lou Costello, Long J.D. Jr., and the Bela Lugosi in Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein. I didn't know Bela Lugosi was the name of a man. I thought all the horror film monsters and all the actors worked as a team, and the name of the team was Bela Lugosi.
Which makes perfect sense when you're 5.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, that
it's
would
like
be
Monty Python was a person when I was a kid.
Or to me, it was closer to like the Justice League of America, all right? All
Bela
those
Lugosi
guys together were called the Bela Lugosi.
That's so funny.
And it was only, my stepdad said, no, that's a guy. That's the guy who plays Dracula. Oh, really? Yes, and not only that, Quentin, when he was buried in his Dracula cape. No kidding. Yes. Yeah, Frankenstein was definitely my favorite because he would be the ones that I'd have nightmares about or something. My father goes out and has to wrestle with him.
Yeah, Frankenstein was big, and he threw kids down wells.
Yeah, exactly.
Dracula was charming and seemed very interested in the girls.
And then
but
also,
I wasn't really threatened by Dracula as a kid.
I wasn't.
For sure, Frankenstein was good. Frankenstein will kill anything that gets in his path, not really understanding what he's doing.
Well, not only that, I had that record album that Boris Karloff narrated that was kind of the greatest of Universal horror. It came out in the early 70s. And so it has all these clips, sound clips from the Universal horror as Boris Karloff kind of takes you through it all. And then the one clip that was truly terrifying, even more terrifying than when I saw it in the movie, was, I think it's in Son of Frankenstein, basically the part that, I think it's Albert Decker played him in the movie, but he was the part that Kenneth Mars parodied in Young Frankenstein, the guy with the metal arm.
Yeah.
And he tells the story of how he got his metal arm, and he's talking to the little boy of Basil Rathbone's Frankenstein's grandfather. He goes, yes, I was a child, no more than your son's age. The monster was rampaging the countryside, killing, maiming, terrorizing. One day he broke into our house. I didn't know that the Frankenstein monster was just bursting into
rampaging across the
houses and murdering families. Threw my father across the room, and then he grabbed me by the arm. It's quite a sound. Sound of your own arm being ripped out by the roots. That is horrifying. That's horrifying now, just repeating it.
Especially to a young child.
Yeah. And remember, there's the whole thing in Son of Frankenstein where they're 2-year-old son, and Frankenstein is putting his big foot on him, is holding him in place. Yeah, it was.
I remember when those Hammer movies came out, to me, those monsters were all black and white. Because I guess I saw those first. And then when I was a little bit older, I started watching the Hammer films. And the girls were the most beautiful girls I'd ever seen. And I'd never seen blood. Real, colorful blood.
Well, here was the thing is, because the name, Dracula, Frankenstein was such, there was Batman, all right? It was they were these pop culture words that got me excited. So around that time was when they actually started showing the Hammer horror films, started getting played on television. Because most of them were released by Warner 7 Arts. So they were actually getting played at night on the networks. The Dracula ones I liked. I'm sure for the most part I found them boring. For me, as a kid, it took too long
to get to the good stuff.
But I do very much remember the end of the first one, Horror of Dracula, where there's the light beam, the beam of light coming in through the shaft, and he takes the 2 candlesticks and he gets in there and he dissolves. Well, that was awesome. That looked really
amazing.
Cool. And then I always remember the ends of them. Remember Brides of Dracula? My stepfather really liked that movie a lot. And the one where there's the windmill, and Peter Cushing hangs on the blade of the windmill until the windmill turns into a cross itself. And that was this big thing. I was so excited when Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed was going to air on television. I was so excited to see that. I thought, this is going to be great. To me, Frankenstein had to look like the Universal Frankenstein, or
There wasn't Frankenstein.
or it wasn't Frankenstein. There was no way.
Without the bolts,
All
it's
right,
not
yeah.
Frankenstein.
And then all of a sudden, it's like this wimpy bald guy playing the monster, and I was just not into it.
Yeah.
I could see my parents were really getting into it, but I hated it. I thought it was
It
just
didn't count. I know. Dracula.
It just didn't count.
But it's what you say. It's your
I mean,
point.
now I love that movie. That might be my favorite Hammer film of all time. Is Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. And actually, I now prefer the Hammer Frankenstein series to the Hammer Dracula series.
Really?
There's a couple reasons. One, because Terence Fisher did more of them.
Right.
To me, it's either Terence Fisher or it's nowhere. But also, I liked the concept that they had because they couldn't use the Jack Pierce makeup design that Universal owned. And even they knew that was a problem. Then what they did was they turned Dr. Frankenstein into the monster. And the real Frankenstein monster was always
Dr. Frankenstein.
was a pathetic creature. A creature that didn't ask for any of this and is very confused and has the most heartless father he could possibly have. And you felt sorry for the monster and you pitied the monster. And you were just appalled by how truly inhuman and monstrous the actual human was.
Do you remember the terror of watching Salem's Lot on television as a kid? Did you watch it when it was first broadcast?
No,
'Cause
I
that
didn't. I
freaked
remember.
me out.
I remember when it was first broadcast. No, I was actually, unfortunately, or fortunately, I had just gotten into doing theater at that time, so that actually literally was on our rehearsal days, and it was driving me crazy.
'Cause you couldn't record it.
I couldn't see the Salem's Lot miniseries, but I did pick up the Laserdisc of it, which wasn't on video. It was the European cut of the TV movie, but on Laserdisc, it was the whole 4-hour miniseries.
Stephen King, because I interviewed King about that, and he was talking about how Dracula was so handsome and romantic, and to him, vampires were always like disgusting and these awful like creatures from the dead, and that was part of what he did in Salem's Lot was to bring it back to that. I love the vampire makeup in Dusk Till Dawn. You acting in that movie, being in that makeup, that for me was one of the coolest reinventions. It's like every now and then there'll be like a full reinvented twist on the genre. Writing that, being into that, was that something you wanted to do to bring it back to that hardcore vampire?
Well, it was interesting because Robert Kurtzman, who was the K of K&B, makeup effects, came up with the original treatment of it. And I read it, and I think I fleshed it out more, but his vampires did kind of point in this weird direction that I had never quite seen before for vampires. They could turn human. I'm not human. They could take on the shapes of humans like they do in the Danny Trejo character or the Satanico Pandemonium character. But their true selves were these bat-like creatures. And so we kept going with that. I kept pushing that, and then K&B kept pushing that in the makeup. And Robert kept thinking it was a good enough idea to keep going with it, that they were very rodential. Their basisness was of a rodent creature, like a weird mix of a rat and a weird mix of a bat. And that's who they truly were. And I'm sure they don't even turn into Salma Hayek, and they don't even turn into Danny Trejo. That's just some weird mass hypnosis
That they can do to people. Yeah.
that they can do to people. It might seem seem sexy that I'm sucking Salma Hayek's toes, but I'm actually sucking the toes of some rat creature. All right, I just don't know it. All right, she's controlled my senses.
At the time, it seems great.
Yeah, at the time, okay, I was a mass hypnosis. But there was this aspect about them that we started coming up with our own. Okay. Well, since we're basically kind of turning them into rats. I mean, literally to the point that when one of them, I think it's the Tom Savini one, Sex Machine, actually turns into an actual rat.
Yeah.
All right. So that just shows you where I know, rat with a tail and everything. Since that was our idea, part of the fun part about that is, okay, so, they're like bats living in a cave or a colony of rats living under a house. So I came up with a few of their mythology things that would be specific to these creatures. One was, they could definitely be killed by a wooden stake to the heart. That still worked. Their blood was green. And the reason I made their blood green is because I knew there would be vampire blood all over the place, and it would be the color red in particular that would get you an R, or in particularly an
X.
NC-17.
Yeah,
an NC-17. So if we made the vampire blood green,
You could spray it all over the place.
We could spray it all over the place, and then the MPA wouldn't be so freaked out by that. And that ended up actually working.
Because the mid-'90s was a very restrictive time of movies.
Yeah, it was very restrictive.
You look at now, it's like you can't believe that was an issue. But in the mid-'90s, that was like a period of
we were trying not to get an NC-17. We weren't trying to get an R. We were hoping for an R. But that actually even gave way to one of the better shots in the piece when I stab Danny Trejo in the hand, and then Juliette Lewis turns around and sees that the blood dripping off the blade is green. And she's, oh, what's up with that? And then then all hell breaks loose. So that ended up being a thing. But then I added one more thing to it. They could be spiked and staked, but once they died, it was a situation, and when they did the series, they didn't follow through on this, and it's too bad, because I think it was one of the things that was like the coolest of the mythology that we created, was once they officially were dead, then there was like a beat of 1, 2, 3, and they exploded. I mean, it was more like they flamed out.
Yeah.
And then they were just ashes. And the reason I thought that was an interesting thing was because a big fight, big massive battle, Vietnam battle, has happened in this bar. So there's alcohol all over the place. So they do that to one of the vampires, and now the place is burning down. Right. And the bats are outside trying to get in. You know, so to me, it was like a situation, and again, in all these Alien sequels, they keep ignoring the fact, they don't ignore the fact that the alien's blood
is acid
and it can eat through things. It's just never a plot point anymore, where it was the plot point.
The only plot point of
the first movie. You couldn't just kill him.
Because the thing was going to,
now your
ship is going to explode, melt right through. Just in Finishing Vampires, it feels like there's two schools. There's like people that like the Max Schreck, Nosferatu, Salem's Lot, Dusk Till Dawn, and then there's Interview with the Vampire and Twilight. Do you have a particular camp, and how do you feel about when rules are changed, like vampires being able to sparkle?
I'm sure if I was a 12 or 13-year-old girl, I would love the Twilight books, and I would love the Twilight movies. I can honestly say I've never seen a Twilight movie, but I'm not putting them down. I even remember somebody saying what's good about a Twilight movie is it makes everybody who watches it feel like a 13-year-old girl. All right? It taps into that aspect of it. But okay, what was the other example?
The other, with the Max Schreck, the Salem's Lot.
Yeah, but what was the other one like?
Interview with the Vampire.
Okay, yeah. Well, one of the things that's interesting about that, I never saw Interview with the Vampire, to tell you the truth, but using it as a cultural link with homosexuality has been part of the vampire mystique. But when you couldn't deal with homosexuality, you could deal with it to some degree or another in vampire movies, even going back as far as the 30s.
Really?
Yeah, well, Dracula's Daughter has probably the most famous lesbian sequence in an American movie made in the 30s. I mean, it's not exactly Mädchen in uniform, but that's a German movie. She sends her devoted slave chauffeur out to pick up a woman for her to feed on. And he says, oh, well, my mistress is an artist. He finds a woman, she's coming from a sensitive place. He finds a woman who's going to commit suicide. And he goes, hey, things aren't so bad. Come to my mistress's castle. She's an artist, and she could paint a beautiful woman like you. She'll give you money. She'll give you a warm place to sleep for the weekend if you have to. Okay. And I was going to kill myself, might as well. So she goes over, and then when she sees Dracula's Daughter, she's like, oh, wow. I was scared by the other guy, but there's no reason to be scared whatsoever, And she starts seducing her, basically seducing her by making her feel comfortable, making her feel open, stand up against, she has a little painting canvas on an easel. The woman starts moving down her dress to show her bare shoulders and is taking this position, and then eventually she bites her. Yeah, but the thing is, it is a seduction scene. They are two people of the same sex, and and ultimately she ends up feeding on her, sucking her dry. Even when it came out, Universal got a big notice from the Hays Board about, whoa, you can't do this scene the way it's written. I mean, the suggestion of a female seduction is just right there. It's just there. It's not even subtext. So you need to calm this down. So there's not even a suggestion of it. Well, this is the cleaned down version, and it's nothing but suggestive. You know, and
it's
you can't watch it in a theater today without the giggling goes on, because it is what it is.
I remember that when Interview with the Vampire came out. People
They're putting it up front. But you know, for years though, because it was one of the interesting things that until you took it into consideration, most people didn't think about, was the fact that the kiss of a vampire, it is sort of like a kiss. You are exchanging fluids, and the fact that male vampires have male victims and female vampires can have female victims. And as you well know, that showed itself more and more in American movies, and then in Europe and France, Jean Rollin made a whole subgenre on the female lesbian vampire movie. And it was commonplace, particularly in the 70s. Lesbians would say, oh wow, I just saw this magnificent movie about these two women that were in love, and it really played the relationship for all it's worth. I mean, they're vampires, all right? But
that's well, this is one of the cool things about horror, is that historically it's always been able to deal with taboo subjects.
Yeah.
And even zombies, being an early metaphor for slavery, and then Romero and Night of the Living Dead being a metaphor for racism, and then consumerism, and now to dystopian society. Were you aware of that stuff as a kid? I mean, do you think that that's one of the reasons why horror still has that power? Or is it something deeper? Is it like, I know I'm jumping around, like horror is a social issues. Do you think people are aware they're watching it for those social issues when they're watching it, or do you think they're just enjoying it on a primal level?
You know, in the 70s, if I saw Burnt Offerings or something like that, I don't think I actually was thinking about any metaphors going on. But then a lot of the classic horror films, or even science fiction films, were presented to you that way. You know, I think I was, told about the McCarthy subtext in Invasion of the Body Snatchers before I even saw Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Because that was what people who loved the movie, loved about it.
Did you, I know you love Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That's just one of the all-time classics.
Yeah.
Do you have like a memory of the first time you saw it?
It came out when it came out in the 50s, and it did what it did. But in the 60s and early 70s, there became a whole spate of movies that most people didn't know about, but they kind of found them on late night television. And they weren't maybe even 100% sure what it was they saw. And so they walked around, maybe they didn't have a TV guide available, and so they walked around with this, talked to their friends at Bridge. I saw this weird movie.
Yeah, we had a show called The Lenny Clark Show. They showed Son of the Blob.
Yeah. So you saw this weird show on, and they don't know what it is, so they describe a weird scene to somebody and to see if it
I still get that.
Something.
People come up, they're like, I have the scene from this movie that I saw on TV as a kid, and I don't know what film it is.
So the thing is, I remember particularly, actually the movie was vaguely, by the time I saw it, a little anticlimactic compared to my stepfather describing these disturbing scenes from Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and like two parents coming with a pod and putting it in the crib of their child, and them just kind of looking at each other. And I don't even know if I've ever seen that scene. I think he might have,
might have made that up.
He might have made that up. All right. I keep watching the movie and I keep never seeing that scene. And that was the scene he kept referring to. And I never knew what it was for 30 years. But a friend of my dad's described in detail the opening credits to the final shot of some movie about a maniac that is taken over a family and is holding them hostage. And he described it to the nth. I saw the movie.
Yeah.
It took me 35 years to realize what movie he was talking about. He was talking about Arch Hall Jr. in The Sadist. The James Landis film. He was talking about, but trust me, for those 35 years, and I kept imagining the psycho who was the star of the movie, it never occurred to me it was Arch Hall Jr.
That is so funny.
I even remember my dad's friend. His name was Don. All right. He goes, and this is the kind of guy that if you saw him crossing the street, you would hit the gas. He is that disturbing looking.
It's weird how the...
like, Arch Hall Jr. is that disturbing looking?
But it's weird how...
He's like a sexy Michael J. Pollard. If Michael J. Pollard was like a rock star, he would look like...
I remember my mom would let me watch The Exorcist, but I was not allowed to watch House of Wax. Because she had seen House of Wax when she was 8, and her memory was that House of Wax was the scariest movie ever made.
There was 2 movies my mother did not allow me to see. One she didn't have to worry about because it was rated X.
Which was?
Andy Warhol's Frankenstein. But she didn't allow me to see, in its initial release, The Exorcist. And there was a reason for that. You have to be at least as old as I am and be living with your grandparents where they get The Inquirer every week. The whole thing about The Exorcist was it may be too intense for human beings. That it wasn't just a horror film in '73 when it came out.
You were experiencing the devil.
Yeah, you were experiencing the devil. And that people like committed suicide after they saw The Exorcist, or people were put in insane asylums after they saw The Exorcist. And every new issue of the National Enquirer had, my son went crazy and is in a straitjacket, how watching The Exorcist ruined my life.
I dream of reviews like that.
Yeah,
that's like all I've ever wanted to get as an National Enquirer story.
Literally, you are taking your sanity in your hands to see The Exorcist. I didn't see The Exorcist till its 1975 re-release. And I saw it at a drive-in then.
Did it deliver?
Oh, yeah. No, it was wonderful. I thought it was great.
And The Omen. In my mind, it was a sequel to The Exorcist. Yeah. It was like a companion piece.
Well, The Omen blew me away to some degree even more than The Exorcist because I had heard so much about The Exorcist. Again, it was one of those movies that adults would come to your house and talk about it if they saw it.
So for me, that was Jaws. It was like my parents, they'd come over and go, you saw Jaws? Describe it to me.
Yeah, I would hear told, like, oh, I didn't think that was so bad. All that vomit looked like pea soup to me, so I didn't take it seriously. So
my aunt described to me the decapitation. And in slow-mo, I remember making her describe it to me over and over.
Well, that was the difference between The Omen and The Exorcist. Both The Exorcist and Enter the Dragon were two movies, again, because they came out in '73, and that was during part of my Tennessee years. So I didn't see anything that came out unless it was at this one drive-in, and they didn't get anything unless it was 3 years old. So a lot of the '73 movies I had to catch later in re-releases. Same thing with Blazing Saddles. They all came out in '73. Paper Moon, I had to see it with Bad News Bears later on.
I was one. I had to wait until I was conscious enough to see them, but yeah.
Why The Omen ended up blowing me away more is I hadn't heard anything about it. I knew the trailer, and the TV spot was very tame. They were really selling the whole Gregory Peck and the Lee Remick.
Gregory Peck in a horror movie. That was kind of a big deal, having an actor of his stature.
Yeah.
I mean, Max von Sydow, that was a thing in the 70s.
No, but it was,
classy.
It started a thing, though. Well, let me get back to my point so I can finish making it. Yeah, with the Omen TV spot, it seemed like a very tasteful horror film. They really emphasized the Gregory Peck of it all. They really emphasized the Lee Remick of it all. They would show the little Damien character. Maybe they show the baboons going crazy. Other than that, it seemed like a older person's classy horror film. And then you see it, and I wasn't prepared for how scary it was going to get. I wasn't, forget about the gore in it. Didn't see that coming at all. But just the Rottweilers surrounding them in the graveyard was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? But then the decapitations, I never saw that coming. And I was like, that was one of those man called horse moments where like, oh my God, what am I seeing happening? And the way that the head
slow motion,
spinning around.
And also the special effects come around to the fact where you could have a kill in broad daylight in slow motion. That reminds me of the kill in Death Proof, when the girls go through the window in the slow motion. That feels like your version of an Omen-style kill. Yeah,
well, it was actually funny because I had an uncle who was the one that was kind of the most into movies of my family. Like his brother, my stepfather, Kurt, was really into movies, but Cliff was even more. And he gave a great review of Omen 2, because I remember he saw Damien Omen 2. And I go, what did you think about it? It was okay. Oh, what did you like? Well, in The Omen, we don't really know that Damien is the Antichrist. Neither does Gregory Peck. So through the movie, there's an investigation going on. You don't know everything. Now, yes, people who find out about him are killed, but you still don't know everything. It's not until somewhere towards the beginning of the second half that you really come to terms with the fact that they're harboring the Antichrist. So the movie has a story to tell. And then it's going to be, what do they do about it? And Damien Omen 2, we know that from the very beginning. So the entire movie is people finding out about it, and then they die.
It's true. I love the bifurcation. That's why I cut myself in half in Cabin Fever because of the bifurcation in Omen 2 and because of the mutilator.
Okay, look, that's a great set piece in Omen 2, but it's obviously their attempt to, how do we outdo the pane of glass scene?
We're just like, the kid goes, and the guy's there, and it's just
but basically, from that point on, the Omen movies basically become slasher movies because it's just about the kills. You're just waiting for the next kill. But you are correct about bringing up the idea that it was a thing that Gregory Peck was in The Omen, because he was a 50s era established older Hollywood legend that was now appearing in this horror film. And he gave it, and along with Lee Remick, gave it this patina a class. And then that became a thing for a while, getting these 50 era stars to front
Glenn Ford and Happy Birthday to Me.
Yes, I would say he fits, but he's not quite the front.
I was thinking Jack Nicholson in The Shining, Donald Sutherland, Invasion of the Body Snatcher.
Jack Nicholson in The Shining wouldn't count as a 50s era.
No, but in terms of, I was thinking,
but the examples would be obviously William Holden in Damien, Charlton Heston in The Awakening, George C. Scott in The Changeling, Kirk Douglas in The Fury, and in the Omen ripoff, Holocaust 2000. So that became a thing. In fact, not only that, it was De Palma. His feeling, as good as Carrie did, The Omen did better. Carrie would have done as good as The Omen if somebody as famous as Gregory Peck was in it. That there wasn't anybody famous enough in Carrie. I think he's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, because you can't imagine it without Piper Laurie or any of that cast.
Yeah, he got it all just in his head that, not that the film should have been recast, but if there had been a lead role for one of these older stars, it would have done even better. And so that was why, in particular, he gravitated towards The Fury, because he could put a Kirk Douglas in it.
Really? The Fury, that was his response?
The book was its own book, and it's a pretty good book, all right? But the reason they're going to him with it is because it's about telekinesis, and he even redoes scenes from Carrie in it, basically. But part of his real attraction was being able to stick an established movie star.
I feel like I saw things out of order. My order was I saw Exorcist, then I saw The Omen, and everyone's like, you need to see Rosemary's Baby. Yeah. And after those two movies, as a kid, it was a letdown. Yeah, I watch it now, but what was your feeling when you saw Rosemary? Do you remember when you saw Rosemary's Baby?
Well, I don't think
What's your feeling on it?
No, I don't think I actually saw Rosemary's Baby. I missed Rosemary's Baby. I think through my childhood. I think when I finally saw it, I don't think I saw it even from beginning to end. I think it was just it was on television and I saw little clips from it. But I remember when it came out. I mean, there was like the two scariest graphic posters of, when I was 4 and 5, where it's like the pictures of the guy's eyes from In Cold Blood. And that poster was always really scary. And then the crib, on the Rocky Mountain was always really scary to me. I didn't actually end up seeing Rosemary's Baby from beginning to end, frankly, to tell you the truth, until fairly recently. In the last 6 years was like the first time I sat down and watched Rosemary's Baby from beginning to end. It was one of those things I felt like I'd seen it. And I'd heard. I know I have that. I get movie shame about movies I know I'm supposed to see. You sort of like tell people you've seen them, but you really haven't, because people will be like, "How could you not have?" That outrage. But it's like it's never high enough. Oh, The Mutilator. The whole last 5 minutes of The Mutilator is so amazingly great.
Beautiful.
That's my father.
Bloody Buddy Hooker. It's also just like
that's my fucking father.
The Mutilator is one of those slasher. Mutilator is one of those. What I love about The Mutilator is it's one of those slasher movies that they don't even try to make you guess who the killer is. It's like, what? My dad's out of the insane asylum. And it's not even a guy in a mask. It's just a guy. And what does he do?
Wow. Okay. Well, the king of that is Final Exam. All right. That literally is like somebody's dad, right?
It's my dad.
In a Travis Bickle suit who's killing everybody. Mutilator really grows as you watch it, all right? And the last 5 minutes is just, it all comes to fruition. But I think Rosemary's Baby is actually one of the greatest movies ever made now and stuff. But it was one of those ones that I ended up missing it. It was just so famous by the time. And also, for some reason, I never took it home to watch it on video. And I didn't really want to watch it on television, because usually before video cassettes, when a cool movie ended up on television, well, that was the death of it, because they were going to cut the crap out of it. So I never wanted to watch it then. I just saw little sections of it. But there's an interesting thing about Rosemary's Baby is in Polanski's autobiography, he didn't want anything supernatural to happen during the course of the movie, because he wanted Rosemary to be an unreliable narrator. He wanted you to feel that she could just be crazy. Nothing supernatural happens for the entire course of the movie. You know, she could just be paranoid. She could be suffering from some weird pregnancy delusions. All of her fears of the neighbors and the things that they're doing, all of it is absolutely circumstantial evidence. She could just be a paranoid freak. Even to the point when she goes to her Charles Grodin, her first doctor, and even when, you know, sinister Dr. Saperstein says, you know, if you don't quit messing around, we're going to take you straight to an insane asylum. Well, if she was actually really flipping out, that's probably what they would say to her. Even, you know, the lovemaking scene, well, that could just all be a dream. That's a really interesting point. You know, it's not until she actually says, you know, what have you done to his eyes, that there is finally a physical manifestation of what she's been talking
supernatural.
about.
And after that, Polanski, I mean, it's 1968 that movie comes out. In Hollywood, there's no hotter director than Roman Polanski.
Oh, he was the hottest director, most famous director in the world.
Now, what do you think it was about that one movie? Because there had been a lot of hit movies, but what was it about Roman Polanski and that movie that made him an international, world-famous superstar?
Well, it was that movie. That movie caught a wave. That movie made $30 million back when movies didn't make $30 million, not in their first run. If a movie made $12 million, oh, wow.
That's a huge hit.
That's a smash. My Fair Lady would make $60 million or $70 million. Sound of Music would make $60 million or $70 million because they played for 3 years straight continuously, and every family in America saw it like 3 times. So to make, in your initial run, make $30 million in a movie that they're being rather prohibitive about who and who can't see it, it was a phenomenon. And The Devil had never been dealt with in that realistic a form before. A horror film had never seemed both so completely realistic, completely living in the world that we know.
The Vidal Sassoon haircut, the music, everything about it.
And then yet be terrifying. It was also the explosion of Mia Farrow as an icon, as a style icon. Twiggy could have played that part with the Sassoon haircut, with her Peyton Place lineage, and then the whole Frank Sinatra of it all still attached to everything. It was an absolute phenomenon.
Probably the closest, most recent phenomenon would be Get Out, that caught fire. Some people consider that a possession movie. I always think of it as a mad scientist film. Do you think, in a way, Get Out can fall into the possession category?
I think it straddles both. Well, it definitely is a possession movie. In The Exorcist, they make the case that Reagan is trapped deep inside. And then she does her moments of reaching out, the carving of help me on her belly.
Yeah, she's in some form of the sunken place.
Yeah, she is in the sunken place. She is semi-aware of what's going on, and she's doing what she can. And there are the moments when the demons are weaker, and she's able to make herself known. I think The Exorcist it's the greatest horror film ever made, and that's the horror film that I think that will never be duplicated.
Because he went to a place that just nobody will go to in a movie, with her stabbing herself with the crucifix. They just dealt with it in such a real way.
Yeah.
Like a drama, unflinching.
And it truly was, in its own way, even more than The Wild Bunch and The Godfather. It showed you where you could go in New Hollywood. And I just can't, frankly, imagine any other filmmaker making a movie anywhere near The Exorcist that would be as sincere as Friedkin was. There was a sincerity to his approach. Some of that sincerity might be because he thinks the horror genre is this piddling trifle, so he's going to bring it up to a new level. But normally that means classing it up. He extremed it up. But he had the book. These things happen in the book. It was a world where at least the industry was ready for it, even if the public wasn't. But then that's what they loved about it. But there is just this level of terror that exists to this day that has not dated one iota. I have a movie theater in Los Angeles, a revival house called the New Beverly. Usually on October, it's all horror films, the entire calendar. But what I look for our midnight movies is usually on our Saturday midnights, we change it up. But what I try to do on October is find a bona fide horror classic that has 100% held the test of time, that everyone knows about it, most people have seen it, but maybe they haven't seen it on film in a good print. in a while. Or maybe they've never seen it, or it's been 20 years since they've seen it with an audience reacting to it. But a bona fide, across the board, modern day horror classic, not showing the black and white ones. So far, once I started that, The Exorcist was the first one, and it killed. It absolutely killed. Just people were just terrified. The second one was Rosemary's Baby, and that played magnificently. And the third one was Ridley Scott's original Alien. Frankly, the only other one to be shown that would fit into that category would be Jaws. That's kind of it. When it comes to bona fide classics that can go back 30 years, it's not Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the little movie that broke out, but actual Hollywood studio classic movie.
Why do you think Get Out became... we knew it was going to cross over into something, but the movie that's doing... I mean, Quiet Place is kind of doing that now.
Yeah.
But Get Out was legitimately... Like, everyone started talking about The Sunken Place as a point of reference.
Yeah.
He caught something in that movie. What do you think clicked about people? Because you're so tuned into black audiences and that cinema. I mean, we can talk about going back to Blackula, tracing Blackula to this. I don't know. What do you think caught fire with that movie?
I think it was two things. For a black audience, it was a movie they had never seen before, but always wanted to see, even though they didn't know they always wanted to see it. True original movies are that. They're filling a bill that you didn't know that there was a lack of. Black audiences are very aware that there is a dearth of movies being made from a black perspective. They know that, but they didn't know that this was necessarily what they wanted to see until Jordan Peele made it. It spoke to black audiences loud and clear. And there is a thing with black audiences when a movie feels insidery. It's made for them. And then there's a certain level of laughter going on in the audience that the white members of the audience aren't quite sharing. There's a certain insight that the black audience gets because they know that the movie's hip and they get it and they're talking to them. They're not talking to everybody in the audience. They are being spoken to. And it doesn't happen that often, and so that's a really special thing. So I think definitely that is involved. Why I think white audiences responded to it so much is there's some aspects of that they can get as well. But ultimately, why it crossed over to such a good way, I think it was just the storytelling involved. There is a genuine mystery going on in the case of Get Out. Until somebody ruins it for you and tells you about everything, you really don't know where it's going. The audience knows, okay, there's something weird about this family. There is definitely something weird about those black servants. There's something weird about this whole damn place. But exactly what, you don't know. But now you're really watching, because now you're watching a mystery. Now you're watching for something to clue you in. In the case of Get Out, you felt you were in good hands. Okay, I don't know, but I will know. They know what they're doing. There was a confidence to the movie. Jordan Peele knows exactly what he's doing. And we're just going to have to wait for it. As a storyteller, I think one of the most exciting moments that can happen in a movie theater with a bunch of strangers is when you feel them watching the movie to such a degree, like really paying attention to it, and then something is revealed that clears up a little something. Or, the picture isn't fully done, but now you can see a few of the trees. Now the outline of the barn and the landscape is starting to come into effect. All right, and that is the moment when he goes through the old photos.
Which, by the way, is a timeless horror trope that when done right, whether it's the others, like finding the box with the photos, whenever you see that in a movie, and he made it fresh. He made it fresh, and, he just deserves all the props for that in the world, because one, you had what I mean when it comes to that moment that you're waiting for that's so exciting is when the audience does a collective, and you have that moment happen. You have that moment happen in Get Out. Everybody who saw Get Out, who didn't see it on a matinee with only 4 other people in the theater, but if you saw it on the weekends with a lot of people in the movie theater, the audience does a collective, But it's the best kind of collective awe because he doesn't tell you everything. There is still a whole lot more to be known. But now you're getting a sense of where this conspiracy lies. And now you don't quite know that the white girl is, to the degree she is the villain, you don't quite know, but you know there's something shady about her now that you didn't know before. And it's the really seeing the older black maid in the younger guys that you really, okay, this is really effed up. This is not just white liberalism being awkward. Yeah, this is weird.
This is weird.
Do you think Blackula, which was fully targeting black audiences, did audiences have the same reaction? Are you a fan of Blackula? I mean, was that combining horror and blaxploitation?
I don't like Scream Blackula Scream. I think Scream Blackula Scream is really silly. All right. I can't quite judge Blackula as a horror film, but I loved William Marshall in it.
Yeah.
Because William Marshall was this really terrific Shakespearean black actor. Every time he had appeared in almost anything else, he's always the...
Abby?
Well, no, that's another horror film. But the stuff he did before that, he was always a tribal leader on Ron Eli's Tarzan, or he's an African representative at the UN in an I Spy episode, or he's one of the politicians in either The Boston Strangler or Twilight's Last Gleaming. He's always like, because of his diction. Mm-hmm. He's also the king of cartoons on Pee-wee's Big
Yes,
Playhouse.
Of course.
Blackula it gave him a really great role for him to really giving it his Othello best in it. And I think the rest of the movie is fairly silly, all right? But his performance has a lot of dignity, and he looks magnificent in his outfits. And I like
true.
It's fun to watch it. And it's fun to watch him beat up the cops. Who does Blackula fight? The cops.
But it's true. It's a Shakespearean actor in a blaxploitation film.
Yeah.
You actually didn't see that style of acting often in those types of movies. Possession. Do you remember the first time you saw Evil Dead? I mean, Evil Dead for me was like taking the most terrifying parts in The Exorcist and just jacking it up and multiplying it with 6 characters right from the opening scene.
Yeah.
I saw that at the right age. Do you remember when you first saw Evil Dead?
Yeah, I saw it the day it was released. I'm sure I saw it that Friday. Because I was waiting for it, because I read the Fangoria cover that had Ash with the chainsaw on it, and Stephen King, I have just seen the scariest movie of this decade or whatever, because it had played at MeFed or something. That was the news about it. There would be, movies like The Dorm That Dripped Blood or something would get coverage in Fangoria, but they wouldn't go apeshit over it. This they went apeshit over. I think I'd read an interview with Raimi and Tappert before I even saw the movie, so I saw it the day it opened.
That was like what made me want. And that, as a kid, was like, the fact that he was 21 and did it in the woods, I was like, you don't have to be from Hollywood to make a movie.
Oh, yeah.
That was the first time I conceptualized that.
And that was great. And the Coen brothers with Blood Simple was great. But then, even though there was Crime Wave in between, then they follow it up with Raising Arizona and Evil Dead 2, which in my generation of young guys, those were the 2 best movies made in our lifetimes.
I know. That was for me, Evil Dead 2, for sure.
Evil Dead 2 and Raising Arizona, and the crazy way they shot it with all the camera doing all this stuff that we had never seen before.
With Three Stooges humor thrown into the most violent horror movie you'd ever seen. It was like taking the violence of the Three Stooges seriously.
Yeah. And both Raising Arizona and Evil Dead 2 just keep trying to top each other with their weird camera shots and whatever. If you're a movie-mad young guy in your early 20s and you see Raising Arizona and you see Evil Dead 2 and you see that shooting style, it's like, well, what's the point of ever shooting any movie not like that?
I know.
All right? That seemed like, okay, a new shooting style has been developed and everything else looks old-fashioned by comparison.
Well,
every single thing just seems old-fashioned and dated unless you're doing that. Where all the older critics are, okay, well, what's going to happen the day they make a real movie?
Right. But as a kid, when I first saw the first shot of Evil Dead, when the camera starts moving, there's the first thing of, how are they doing this? But I was also like, oh, this is what a demonic spirit point of view shot. Like, we'd seen the shark POV. But never the demonic spirit point of view going through the cabin and that,
boom, and the doors fly off and everything. Yeah.
It's the scariest thing I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And then you play the tape, and it's just in the bile and the gore, and and even that it sort of had that basket case, 16 millimeter stop motion animation quality. I fucking loved it.
There was also something else about Evil Dead that made it also kind of particularly cool. Was you had to get it. Not everyone could get it. It was cheap. You had to be able to not just look beyond that. You had to embrace that, and also. It is scary, but there is a really weird sense of humor that if you're not in line with it, you're going to think, oh, that's just a piece of junk. And so you had to get Evil Dead 2. And if you were smart enough to get it, then, oh, it's the greatest thing ever. You're not going to show it to your aunt or your mom and have them accept it, or even some girl you know, have them accept it. When we watch Evil Dead 2 and we see the little model car going on the bridge, we think that's the height of creativity.
It's brilliant.
Somebody else is like, it's a cheap model car. What the fuck?
But then you wind up working with, I mean, probably 4 years later, 5 years later, you're working with K&B on Reservoir Dogs. That must have been awesome. I mean, I know when I worked with Howard Berger, and when I finally met Berger and Nick, all I did was pump them for stories for Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. How conscious of that, when you were making your first movie, thinking about K&B, doing the blood, I remember for me that Reservoir Dogs, and we don't have to go too far into Reservoir Dogs, but just the feeling of getting to finally do that. And getting to finally pump the blood. That was the most, for me, when I did...
Well, look, you did a horror film. We didn't really have that, our thing, all right? You know, you did a horror film. So you had to come up with, okay, this is disease, flesh-eating disease stage 1. This is flesh-eating disease stage 2. Okay, now Jordan Ladd in the shed is like this. I really didn't get into that.
Do that. Look, I was trying to do Evil Dead. I, in a weird way, Cabin Fever was my version of a possession movie. It's like, there's the thing, it gets in your body, that's your friend, but you got to kill that thing.
Right, yeah.
That always freaked me out. That thing in Evil Dead of like, you're going somewhere with your friends and you're killing them, but you have no choice. It's just, now they're the same.
Well, you have no choice, but then at the same time, the weird irony of Cabin Fever is nobody dies from the fucking disease, all right? They die... They get the disease, but they die from their friends or from random people. We don't even know if the disease would kill you.
It doesn't. It doesn't. That was the whole idea, was that if they just left them alone and came back 2 years later, they'd be super decayed, but they wouldn't have died from it. They might have died from other things, but they would never, the disease never kills you.
And then and when Ryder Strong is now caving in skulls with shovels, you think he's gone rather extreme. But at that very first screening, with the AFI festival that I saw, and I'm sure it was repeated all over America when it played, the moment when we know the river is full of this disease crap, and then he's got to get something out of the river, and then the ladder breaks and he falls right onto the muck. The entire audience just jumped out of their skin just screaming because the worst thing that could possibly happen just happened.
For me, I felt like on Kill Bill, you had license to spray blood.
Yeah.
And that was where you finally, it was like a pressure buildup, this just release, and you knew.
And I'm going to do it the Japanese style. So it's all Shogun Assassin, all right? People have garden hoses for veins. And you can ask Howard Berger, I was a tyrant on that because they weren't doing the blood right. Too many tubes, I'm seeing too much, this is crap. It's not spraying out the way I want. What is this crappy color? That's not the color we said. Okay, now it looks like Delaware Punch. What's going on with that? What the fuck did I bring you guys to China for? And then in the last 3 weeks, when we knew that, okay, the House of Blue Leaves is coming to an end. Not the last 3 weeks of the House of Blue Leaves, but that would still be in the middle of it. But it's running its course. We've done it. We're just wrapping it up. Howard Berger was like, gosh, I can't believe we're going to get through this sequence without one last Quentin blood tirade, yelling at the top of his lungs about what idiots we are and how the effects just don't work. Because, they were on the hot seat. They were on the hot seat. We're all waiting around for them. So they're either heroes or bums. All right, so either the hero of the shot or you guys are fucking bums. We're all waiting around for you, and this is what you give me. And he goes, I can't believe there's not going to be one last Quentin blood tirade. And then something happened that was supposed to go, and then instead of went, and so it was like, God damn it, da 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 da. And then Howard and Chris Nelson, no, that's not a Quentin blood tirade. You're not even mad. That's just for effect. That's no tirade.
That's a fake tirade.
That's a fake tirade. Yeah, that's no Quentin. I guess we got out of the woods, right? Because there's no more tirade in you.
I directly benefited from your tirades because the movie they did after Kill Bill was Hostel, and when we went to talk about blood, Howard's like, oh, do I know about blood? He was a sommelier. He's like, would you like an 82 Bordeaux? Would you like a Pinot Noir? He knew, because I'm like you, very specific about the color. And then I didn't realize, okay, blood that goes on metal, blood that goes on a shirt, like dark clothes is this, blood that goes on skin. The light, everything changes.
Well, that's the thing, is they get used to, everything is the blood that you can put in your mouth. all right? And everything is the blood that you put on your clothes or on your skin, but you put that on metal and it looks like exactly what it is. It looks like raspberry pancake syrup and it looks like shit.
It's so weird.
You know, but in Japan, they use paint. That's why, you know, you watch the really cool bloody samurai movies and then they cut some guy's head off. And, you know, there's just the little part of the samurai blade that touch blood. And it's all thick and there's a little dripping from it, you know, and that's this paint kind of process. So it's like this sharp red against the stainless steel.
The Italians had beautiful red blood. That was so. Which did you see first, Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead? Or Day of the Dead?
I think it turned out that I ended up seeing Dawn of the Dead first. I knew all about Night of the Living Dead, but I think Dawn of the Dead was my first time seeing it. The first time I saw Night of the Living Dead was actually a pretty interesting screening because I knew it was showing up on television. And I was at an adult party. It was when I was 16, saying I was older, working in a community theater. And I'd always wanted to...
What did you do at the community theater?
Oh, I was acting in plays.
Okay.
But I was hanging around all these adults. I said I was 18 so I could do the plays there. And so they were having one of their parties that Saturday night, and at 1 o'clock they were showing Night of the Living Dead, and I'm going to finally see it. So I don't even know whose house this was. I went in the bedroom and turned on the TV, and I ended up watching it to the very end. And then when that was over, I went out and joined the party.
What did you think when you first saw Night of the Living Dead?
No, I thought it was fantastic, but I was blown away by the ending. When Dwayne Jones gets killed, I was blown away.
That to me, I was like, I heard this movie shocking, and I remember being in pain, upset. I'm almost feeling ripped off, but so angry at those guys. I totally ripped it off for Cabin Fever also.
Exactly, yeah.
But you don't quite feel the same because he's an asshole.
Yeah.
But Dwayne, that was a fucking ballsy thing of Romero to cast Dwayne Jones as the lead and not even make a deal out of his race, even though it's all right there in the subtext.
Yeah.
But him as a white filmmaker in Pittsburgh making movies about race in 1968.
Well, he carries it through in the first 4 Dead movies that there is always this black male leading character. That, you know, our mutual friend Elvis Mitchell has been working on this thing of the top 10 seminal, basically black movies, for lack of a better term, starting in the late 60s and basically ending at the end of the 70s. His 2 bookends, number 1 is Night of the Living Dead, and on the other end of the spectrum, the last official one is The Wiz. A really, really good one that doesn't get mentioned that much because it wasn't a hit when it came out. But it was one of the studio's first attempts to try to really parlay the success of Rosemary's Baby was Paul Winco's The Mephisto Waltz. That is really terrific. It's with Alan Alda, and I'm not really even that big of an Alan Alda fan, but Alan Alda and Jacqueline Bisset and Barbara Parkins and Kurt Jurgens. Alan Alda is a failed pianist who is, he's gone through the classical training, but he ultimately really didn't have what it took. So now he's a journalist writing about classical music. Kurt Jurgens plays a beyond the beyond maestro who's come into town to do a concert. And Alan Alda is sent there to interview him. And already you realize that there's something weird about Kurt Jurgens' character because his daughter kind of acts, played by Barbara Parkins, acts as his manager. And it's obvious they have like a disturbing relationship for a daughter and a father. But they seem more interested in Alan Alda than even he is in them, even though the pianist is a superstar. And ultimately, what you realize is basically the pianist is the spirit of this great pianist that has been kind of around for like maybe even 100 years or 150 years. And it needs to find a new host. And it's the devil. It's like they make a pact with the devil. The thing on the
that's what they're grooving.
The thing on the floor and everything. All right, he's got to know
pentagrams.
He needs to know music. He needs to be able to read music, and he needs to have some breadth of talent to some degree. And then now it's Kurt Jurgens. It's time for him to. They need a new body. He's getting too old, and so it's going to now be Alan Alda. And so he goes for it. But his girlfriend is almost like the reverse of Rosemary's Baby. His girlfriend is Jacqueline Bisset. And she starts realizing, well, whoa, When did he start becoming so good as a pianist? And then now all of a sudden he's become a superstar, but he's just very different and his whole attitude is completely different. And little by little, she starts figuring out that he sold his soul to the devil. Wow. To be this great pianist. That's the setup of the movie, and that's more or less, I think, probably what you would read in a much shorter version in even the Leonard Maltin movies on TV if you looked up Mephisto Waltz in it. What you're not prepared for is the last 20 minutes. It goes in its own direction story-wise. I'm not saying it's graphic or anything, but it goes its own direction so completely that you're really not prepared for the last 20 minutes of the movie in the way they wrap up the story. And basically what Jacqueline Bisset does when she finally, after she's playing detective to figure out what's going on, once she realizes what the deal is. It's a really good movie. And Paul Winkos is a terrific director. And
I've never seen it. I probably confused it with the movie Mephisto from 1980.
Yeah, you probably did. Yeah, the Mephisto Waltz.
It was like the Mephisto subgenre.
Yeah, exactly. And one, they both deal with the same subject. All right, they both are metaphors for the character of Mephisto who sells his soul for art. But Paul Winkos also did a lot of the great TV horror films. You mentioned.
We were talking about Salem's Lot.
Yeah, you mentioned, but also you mentioned. Glenn Ford. And that. Well, actually, Glenn Ford was the first to get on that bandwagon of like a classy 50s era actor starring in a horror film. He did a real famous TV movie in the very early, like in '71, called Brotherhood of the Bell, which also kind of is a bit of a jumping off point from Rosemary's Baby and Salem's Lot. He moves to a town, and it turns out this town is run by, I think they're Satanists, something like that. You know.
What about The Devil's Reign? Would that fall into that?
No, that's a theatrical.
That's a theatrical. But I'm thinking about the 50s star that does the 70s movie.
Yeah, but the thing about it, I don't think it applies, because the point of having a classy person or a classy actor from the 50s, like your dad's actor, your mom's actor, like a Gregory Peck or a Charlton Heston, as opposed to say a Joseph Cotten, who's been doing cheapy movies for a long time by that point in time. They were Charlton Heston, they were Gregory Peck. This could be a normal Gregory Peck, Kirk Douglas, Charlton Heston movie until things start going weird.
How would you explain to someone today who's used to seeing anything at any time what a 70s made-for-TV horror movie was? Because they were very, very special events as a kid. And also the fact that it was on TV, the challenge was, how are they going to make it scary without making it graphic or gory? But there were some awesome ones. Well,
one, they had really good stories, frankly, with the exception of things like...
And Carpenter did them, and a lot of directors did them.
Yeah, if you're discounting like studio ones like Carrie or Rosemary's Baby, and you're thinking more about Halloween or Texas Chainsaw Massacre or or Squirm, cool cheapy ones that broke the mold there. With the exception of the tip top of those, we like a lot of the ones that aren't the tip top. But with the exception of the tip top, the TV movie horror films hold up better than a lot of the exploitation horror films made at the day. They were a little classier. They didn't really have any more time, but they had better actors usually. And they had good stories, and they had some like graphic stuff. Do
you have a favorite?
Nothing really
Bad
competes.
Ronald,
that's a great story. That's a great one, but nothing really competes, especially when it came out with The Night Stalker.
Yeah.
That first one, The Night Stalker. And what it was about those movies was the idea that, you're a kid. These are definitely a horror film you can see. Not only can you see them, you can watch them with your parents. Unless your parents had a problem with horror films. My stepdad certainly didn't. My mom.
I watch horror movies with my parents all the time.
Yeah. So so we all watched The Night Stalker. Thought it was amazing. Frankly, when they worked, whether it was Night Stalker or Bad Ronald or Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, they actually had a level of narrative drive that the exploitation movies never had. The exploitation movies were oftentimes very stop and start and stop and start.
Well, they had to drive so you wouldn't change during the commercials.
Yeah. The adrenaline drive of The Night Stalker, is like Duel. It just doesn't stop. It just keeps coming, and you just keep.
Duel
is
the greatest
masterpiece. All right, it's very horrifying, but nothing supernatural happens.
Right. Duel and Death Proof are interesting companion pieces. That would be a really cool double bill to show those two movies.
That would be, but like even in The Night Stalker, you walk around thinking the guy's crazy. He thinks he's a vampire. And they even use that in the trailer. He thinks he's a vampire.
Vampire's Kiss, Nicolas Cage.
And like little by little, you start realizing, oh, maybe he really is a vampire. And then you start realizing to like the degree of his prowess that you don't quite know in the first half of the movie, and he becomes almost seemingly indestructible. And that guy, Barry Atwater, did a great job playing that vampire. He was amazing. But one of the things is you had those big splashy ads in the TV guide that would take over the whole page talking about it. And especially if it was an ABC movie of the week, they cut great trailers, they advertised it all week long, then you'd see it. And then if it delivered, like say that, or the Witch Doctor doll in Trilogy of Terror with Karen Black,
yep.
Yes. That guy. If you watched that, then you went back to school the next day, and that was what everyone was talking about.
Yep.
Yeah, that was one of the things. You didn't read reviews or anything.
No,
like
it's
that.
what everyone talked about at school.
It was
the
what
next morning,
everyone talked about at school
TV.
the next day, and everybody was talking about the Night Stalker the next day.
That's awesome. I wanted to talk about zombies just to. The orgiastic violence of Dawn of the Dead, the first time I'd seen it, I had never seen anything like it. That was just that much chock full of gore, one after another.
Yeah.
And the ripoff of it, the fake one, you know, the film that was seen as the lesser time is Fulci's Zombie 2.
Yeah.
And yet over time, I keep going back and forth. I mean, Dawn of the Dead is a masterpiece, but Fulci 2 is always like the ignored cousin. Zombies 2 is always the ignored cousin. But do you remember seeing those two movies? Do you remember when you saw one or the other? Do you have a preference of one or two?
As good as I like Zombie 2, I don't think it's anywhere near as good as Dawn of the Dead. I mean, I think Dawn of the Dead is a real masterpiece. You know? Zombie 2, half of it is a really bad movie. All right, but take away the horrible Ian Richardson and his horrible balding, I don't know what the hell kind of come over thing that he has in that. I mean, the only one is that it was really any good in is John Richardson. He's in a completely other movie. He's in a much classier movie. Having said that, though, the level of gore was in a different area than the flowing blood and the flowing limbs of Dawn of the Dead. And there was no comedy wrapped up in there of like, you know, the rolling head and then it lands on a bag that says shop at Kmart. All right, I mean, that was Romero's level. But just, you know, the whole Caribbean, West Indies aspect of it all really creates its own mythology, all right? It gives it its own sense of mythology. What has the old
school zombie? The guy, the person trying to create a race of slaves.
Yes, and then the fact that they truly are the decomposed bodies of dead black villagers. And then the true mayhem when they get their hands on you that they exude. And it's one of those movies that, while, you know, you have to suffer through a lot in the first 20 minutes, and it doesn't really get that much better for the next 20 minutes. But by that point in time, the story they're telling isn't so bad. And so you do get caught up in it. Once you're finally on the island, once John Richardson enters it, you actually are caught up in the story. And then it has a whiz-bang ending. The last 20 minutes is terrific.
And the zombie fights a shark.
And the zombie fights the shark is just one of the greatest moments in cinema history. All right, as far as I'm concerned, it's just one of the most, you know, cinema entre gens. Just like so outrageous you can't believe what you're seeing. Am I really seeing this? Is this really happening? And then it has one of the great money shots of all time, with the eye into the splinter. Yeah, literally, truly, you know, done like an opera aria. Literally set up like it's the show-stopping curtain number of an opera.
Dawn of the Dead, do you remember, I mean, that movie, there's so many social issues in that film, but it was, as a kid, I remember the first 20 minutes watching it, when they go into that house, and they're shooting other people, the projects, and one of the guys is super racist, and I was like, why is he concerned with racism? It's like a zombie outbreak happening.
Yeah, exactly.
As a kid, I was like, I couldn't believe that was being put in a film, and then it cuts to the greatest headshots I'd ever seen in a movie before. Do you remember when you first saw that?
Yes,
like,
I do.
And
you remember it's that sequence. Also, the opening 20 minutes shows probably the most, to this day, most realistic version of a society under complete collapse.
The television station.
That television station, somebody get that fucking asshole off the air.
Yeah. But the guy who's like the guy with the eye patch, who's just going on.
They are dead, they will rise and they will kill, and the people they kill will kill. I mean, the greatest exposition actor of all time. Because he's also in The Crazies, and he gives the greatest exposition in that, too. He was definitely one of Romero's real finds, that guy. So you just buy the complete breakdown of the society and what do we do and where do we go and what's going on, and not in this big giant scale World War Z kind of way, which I actually kind of like that movie. But
I love World War Z.
Yeah, but in this real low budget margins of just like the media that's being projected on TV that you're seeing, and since it's all done in this public accessy kind of way, Romero kind of really nails it. People just tendentially doing their job before their jobs become irrelevant, and now they must survive. You see Romero and all those people at the
control panel.
At the control panel.
With all the cigarettes, 70s control cigarettes.
Yes, exactly. But what were they doing the next day? Were they hiding from the hills?
Like
was the place just overrun by zombies? What happened to them?
Yeah.
To me, the head explosion didn't really do it for me, because I actually think the coffee head explosion is even a little bit better, frankly, because you see the head in relation to her sawed-off shotgun and Pam Grier. The scene that makes you wonder, oh wow, can I even handle this, is when the zombie in the project, when his wife, who's still alive, comes to her and embraces him, my baby, and then he just bites just a chunk out of her shoulder, and it just looks real. You buy it. It looks, if humans had shark-like mouths, that's probably the effect of what would happen if a sharky human bit you. And it just, in effect, we had never seen before, and it draws a line in the sand. Oh, am I ready for the rest of this?
It's true.
Yeah.
And then the helicopter blade comes in.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the biker zombies. I remember the blood pressure machine, where the guy's just like, beep, beep. And then at the end, when it cuts back and it's just the severed arm and the just the humor of that. But that was but also the idea of them, the fantasy of what if you had a whole mall to yourself? But then also taking it to the point where you're trapped there and you're bored and it doesn't matter, and the humans become zombies by losing their humanity.
But then you also had the weird thing of they've kind of controlled their world. They controlled it, and they've taken care of the zombies. They're outside. There's not a way in. They've kept them out. They're in. Then the biker gang shows up. And they're worse than the damn zombies. Okay, this is human outlaw trash that has waited for society to take a flying fuck, all right, so it can just run rampant, and now they are, and they're running rampant. They're not even afraid of the zombies. They make fun of the zombies. You ever had that moment where you're almost feeling sorry for the zombies because of the way the motorcycle gang is treating them? Yeah.
As violent as Dawn of the Dead was, it was I'd seen it so many times by the time Day of the Dead came out, that I was just how is he going to top it? And then he does, with the chest being ripped open. The effects of the day. Do you remember watching first time you saw Day of the Dead?
Oh yeah, saw it first day, first show. Not first show. First day, first midnight show.
How was it?
Yeah, it was me and all the guys from Video Archives went and saw it. We liked it. We were a little disappointed because, it didn't top Dawn of the Dead, so it's no Dollars trilogy where, okay, for a few dollars more tops Fistful of Dollars, and the Good and the Bad and the Ugly tops that one. It doesn't do that. In fact, it doesn't even try to. It goes underneath. It's more almost like a play, frankly, but it's a pretty good play. For years, I always thought, oh, poor Romero, because he had this big vision of the film and he wasn't able to do it, so this had to be what he could put together because he couldn't do his big vision. But then when I realized later that his big vision was all that Cabrini Green stuff
from Land of the Dead.
Yeah, from Land of the Dead. I hated all that crap, so I actually think Dawn of the Dead was actually Day of the Dead.
Day of the Dead was better off without it.
Well, Day of the Dead, really it was slightly disappointing to us Romero fanatics at the time. All right, even though it did have one really cool thing about, you still had the practicality of how you would deal in a world with zombies like this. When they have to do their testing on zombies, the way they did it like a rodeo or like a cattle dip.
Yep.
All right, where they brought them through the different chutes, all with the collar, the Planet of the Apes kind of stick collars on sticks. It made sense. There was just that weird practicality of, okay, well, this is just the way the world is.
What it would do.
So this is how we have to do it. The small scaleness of it, and the fact that while some of the actors are really good in it, Laurie Cardellini is really terrific in it, as is Joe Platino, I think it is, who I used for a little bit in Pulp Fiction. Yeah, he's really good. This is what's supposed to blow off my socks. All right, But then you had a lot of ham bones in there that were, just not up to the same level that there was in Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. When Romero did Monkey Shines, it was interesting to watch him do a real Hollywood movie in the Hollywood system. And so he's using, like, you know, he's not using his Pittsburgh actors, he's not using famous actors, but he's using good actors. They're professional actors. And there was a Hollywood professional patina to Monkey Shines. It wasn't quite there in the other Romero movies. And it was nice to see that he could work that way. It was nice to see him operate as a professional Hollywood director. I mean, a case could be made that I think, you know, Creepshow did the same thing. And it's a better movie. That's what made George Romero such a terrific filmmaker, was that he was a legit regional filmmaker. And what made it special was the slightly homemade quality to the movie.
And the fact you were seeing these actors in these roles.
Yeah, what made it special was these, you know, there were these
Dwayne Jones, all of them.
Yeah, these Pittsburgh actors. Maybe I don't like the boyfriend and Jack's wife. Okay, he's not that good of an actor, but Jack's wife is pretty good. Right?
Yeah.
The witch woman, she's quite good. Yeah, maybe the boring white and female leads in The Crazies aren't so good, but Lynn Loring is good. The black guy, army guy that descends in the helicopter at the end, he's good. The fat exposition guy with the weird glasses, he's amazing. All right, he's fantastic.
Do you remember?
And Ken Foree is probably like the most genuine actor.
Yeah.
Well, probably along with Galen Ross, but in particularly, Ken Foree kind of exists in a different world than the other three actors that are the main stars in that film. You spend so much time with them that their amateurness is the amateurness of the best kind, because they're not, they're actors because they love acting.
Yeah.
By the time the movie's over, because we spend so much time with them, it actually becomes one of the better character studies in the history of horror films. We've spent so much time with them, they become us.
Yeah.
We love them like we know them because the movie's so damn long, we've gotten to know them. And then forget about probably the best performance in any Romero film is John Amplas as Martin. He's amazing.
I remember a screening that you hosted at your house for Shaun of the Dead.
Oh, yeah.
And it was one of the most raucous, fun, awesome screenings that we'd ever had seeing that movie.
It was fantastic, yeah.
That was pretty cool. There is something about horror movies that when you see people you don't know, it feels real.
Yeah.
And I remember in Berlin when we were shooting Bastards, I got a DVD of a movie called Paranormal Activity. And I watched it and I couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
And I gave it to you the next day and I'm like, I'm telling you, if you watch this movie, you're not gonna sleep. The next day you were like, I couldn't fucking sleep from that movie. That was the Ouija board. Do you remember that? But
very much so.
But part of that,
way before anyone else heard about it, you had already given me the DVD of it.
It was
that happens a lot, actually.
Well, I was like your insider. I was on the film festival circuit and meeting directors, so I was getting slipped
Dead
stuff.
in 3 days.
But that was part of the thing of Paranormal Activity was it felt so real because you had never seen these people before, and it's just like you got footage of what happened in someone's house.
Right. Yeah.
Do you remember that, watching that movie?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And but actually, what was interesting was having seen it and saw it like maybe about a year before it actually opened theatrically. It was fun going to a movie theater, watching it with an audience the first 2 weekends where they hadn't seen it, and I already kind of knew what it was. So to watch their reaction, and it was a great reaction.
That to me is horror in its purest form. When someone makes a movie for $15,000 and they just use salt and the demon hoof print, that was like...
I know, yeah.
It was one of the scariest things I'd ever seen. I'm not normally scared by ghost movies, but I like them. Like Ghost Story as a kid, because it had Fred Astaire and all these actors, and I knew that Dick Smith had done the makeup.
Right.
I was super into that movie as a kid. Were you a ghost movie fan? I mean, Ghostbusters for me was like your Abbott and Costello. Ghostbusters was that 80s version of Abbott and Costello Meet the Wolfman.
You know, it's funny. I'm not really super into ghost stories. I mean, oddly enough, it's funny because it's like...
What about those grand gothic old horror films like The Innocents or The Haunting, those early 60s? Were you never down with those?
I've had everybody tell me since I was a little boy that The Haunting was the scariest movie they ever saw, and it didn't scare me as a little boy, and it doesn't scare me now. I mean, the only thing I like about it is, I'm a big Richard Johnson fan, so he classes up the proceedings a lot. I will give that. And Russ Tamblyn just being a sarcastic jerk to everybody is always fun.
Always fun.
Always fun. That's never not good. But I think that movie is overrated. I think The Innocents is very pretty looking, but I think it's overrated. I think I've never read
Turn of the Screw,
but I've never really cared for any of the movie versions of it. Sixth Sense is a ghost story. That's a ghost story
Sixth
I like
Sense
a lot.
I love. Sixth Sense. Did you see it coming? Did you see the twist?
No, I didn't.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I didn't see
Totally
it at all.
fooled by Sixth Sense.
I'm not a fan of gothic horror. I'm not a fan of movies about the guy or the woman that lives in the castle and there's the painting on the wall, and the painting on the wall is what's causing all the things, whether it be Lenore, Roderick Usher's wife in Fall of the House of Usher. As much as I'm a big fan of Roger Corman movies, I'm not a fan of his Poe films.
But Roger Corman, we interviewed Corman for this.
Yeah.
It was great. Which Corman do you love?
You mean as a director, as a producer?
Both,
or
as anything, yeah. Like, was there a Corman? I mean, what he did, making movies in 2 days, Dementia 13 and Little Shop of Horrors and the exploitation, but the Roger Corman horror films were so much fun.
No, I'm a big fan of all those three-reelers that he would do with like his stock company of Dick Miller and Jonathan Hayes and Susan Cabot or Beverly Garland, or whether it be Not of This Earth or The Wasp Woman I like. But I mean, actually, the one that I actually think is the best is Attack of the Crab Monsters.
Yeah.
That's a good movie. That's like a generally good movie, all right? And it has a great ending, and it builds to a great ending. Always a big fan of Russell Johnson, so to actually see him...
Do you remember when you first... Was that on TV?
Yeah, Channel 5.
Driving?
Yeah, Channel 5. KTLA out here, Channel 5 owned all the AIP films. Attack of the Crab Monsters usually did not play like at midnight or 1 on Saturday. It was always like a 4:30 in the morning show or a 3:45 in the morning. It was the last movie on their Movies Till Dawn. I remember the very end of it, staying up and watching it, and I was like, that was a pretty good one. I like the ending of that. That was pretty good. Yeah, so I really did like Attack of the Crab Monsters quite a bit. I like the whole concept behind Wasp Woman. All right, I think that's kind of cool. I'm not really a fan of his Poe stuff. I actually, frankly, prefer Vincent Price's movies in the 70s more. I prefer Dr. Phibes. I prefer Theater of Blood. I even prefer, frankly, and I might be alone in this, the Gordon Hessler Poe ones, because they're more about something. One, they're not all stage bound. Danny Holler build just this much of the hallway because that's all I'm going to use, and just this much of the dining room because that's all I'm going to use. But when you look at something like The Oblong Box, all right, that deals with slavery and white plantation owner, and it deals with really disturbing stuff, and is like more violent, and it's not the set bound stuff that Corman specialized in those Poe films. I think the exception to those Poe movies is Mask of the Red Death. Because one, he's not using Floyd Crosby again. He's got Nicholas Roeg is this cinematographer, and he probably has the biggest budget he has on all of them. So his whole, and I think he shot that in England. So the entire style is exploded by the time he does Mask of the Red Death, and that's actually quite horrifying, actually. But it's Price's sadism that's horrifying, not the Poe stuff. It's just the fact that he's such a sadistic ruler. Is what's terrifying.
I remember in the 90s with Carnosaur,
Yeah.
or I remember Frankenstein Unbound. He sort of became known as doing the cheap knockoffs.
Yeah, but here's the thing though. For the most part, in the 70s, when he's running New World Pictures, the films that he did that were the best were just straight up ripoffs. The Exorcist ripoff is a genre unto itself. The Jaws ripoff is a genre unto itself.
The Alien ripoff.
The Alien ripoff is really a genre unto itself. Piranha is one of the best movies that Corman produced for New World Pictures. It's got a great script by John Sayles. Joe Dante does a fantastic job.
Paul Bartel.
It's not his official directorial debut because him and Arkush did Hollywood Boulevard together, but as far as a solo directorial debut, it's a pretty great directorial debut. And frankly, the movie holds up to this day. We've shown it at the New Beverly, and Sayles' script is really top notch. It's very funny when it's supposed to be funny. The effects are surprisingly good, but it's also fucking disturbing.
I know.
About how it's actually children being fed to the piranhas, including one insert of a piranha attacking the crotch of like a little girl, and he's totally burrowing in there. And it's a little girl in a
rewatched it.
Inflatable tire.
I know. I rewatched it because of Alex Aja's Piranha 3D.
Yeah.
I was like, we got to watch the old one. I was like, this is way more disturbing than I remember.
Drastically more. And then I even told Aja, I go, it's got that great suspense beat where Bradford Dillman has to go down, and he's got to
turn the
sewer valve that will like close off the river so it doesn't go off into the ocean, and now you got these piranhas everywhere. There's no gauge or anything like that, so it's simply she's got to count to 10, like one Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, or whatever the deal is. He can hold his breath that long. So she's counting it out, and then he's even doing it, and the piranhas get him, but they're eating him, but he can still turn the thing, and she's counting it off. That's a great suspense beat. And I brought that up to Asha. He goes, oh yeah, then I watched that again. That's such a great suspense beat. We have to put that in the movie, but they didn't.
Yeah, they didn't.
That's the reason to remake the movie. Is because that's such a good suspense beat. But then also, Dan O'Bannon, and I think Ron Shusett, that's the way you pronounce his name. Shusett, wrote Alien to get a movie going with Corman. So they wrote their version of what they thought a good New World picture would be that could be doable. Okay, it's all in a spaceship and da-da-da-da-da-da. And so they get it to Corman's people, and they read it, and they're interested. But they're not like snapping it up right away. All right, they're thinking about it. All right, and somehow David Giler and Walter Hill get it, and they read it, and they go, "This script isn't really very good, but it's got a great idea, and it's got a great premise. I think we could do this as a big movie. I think we could do this. I mean, a small movie for Fox, but a big movie for this movie. But we could really do it classy." And so they got in it. I think they made the script a lot better. They added the entire class consciousness. Mm-hmm. Well, they made Ripley a female, and they are the ones that added the whole class system between the ship and a lot of other things. Walter Hill told me that part of the reason that they were even going to do Alien is Fox had a set up at Pinewood Studios because they had done Star Wars there. They had just done Empire Strikes Back. So they have this whole apparatus ready to go at Pinewood Studios with people who know effects. That's the reason we're going to do it, because we have that all set up there. So Walter Hill has decided, I don't want to direct it because I don't know enough about special effects, but I'll Godfather it. They offered it to all these people. They all turned them down. They offered it to one director after another. Each director kept turning them down. Walter talks about, we offered it to Jack Gold. Now, Jack Gold is actually a good director, but Jack Gold is famous for, he's a British TV movie director. One of his most famous theatrical features that played in America was his Robinson Crusoe movie, Man Friday, with Peter O'Toole and Richard Roundtree. But most of his movies are really classy British TV movies. Jack Gold turned it down. And Walter's like, okay, when you've got a greenlit Go film from 20th Century Fox and Jack Gold's turning you down, all right, you got a problem. And so they offered it to Robert Aldrich, and Aldrich said yes, come and meet me. So Giler and Walter Hill go to meet Robert Aldrich. So this is like 1980.
Yeah.
Well, 79. And so they go to meet Robert Aldrich, and Aldrich is like, big burly guy, and he's like, okay, so why aren't you doing it if it's so damn good? Well, I don't feel comfortable with special effects and stuff. I don't feel comfortable enough dealing in that world. Well, I guess I can understand that. I don't have any problem with that. Well, I think you got a terrific picture here. I mean, I think, look, I agree. Story's very interesting. Story's great. You got a good movie. Yeah, we can scare the hell out of the audiences with this. It's a great setup, great story. What are we going to do about this damn alien, though? That's what I got to say. I mean, I don't want a guy in a suit. Don't want that. Now, it's impossible to contemplate Alien without taking H.R. Geiger into effect and his concept of the creature. But you have to put yourself in a world where that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
H.R. Geiger has not been hired. There is no drawings of the alien. They literally are figuring it out. And naturally, they come to the idea of a man in a suit, and they go, oh, that's horrible. We can't do that. We can't do that. Aldrich had an interesting idea. It sounds preposterous, but I don't know what that would look like. His idea was, and he was just spitballing, but it was the idea of something weird. What if we took an orangutan and shaved it? And we shoot inserts of him.
Going
and
around.
then that's
the alien. That would have
Do
been
you
cool.
know what an orangutan without hair would look like? I don't.
But speaking of orangutan, the monologue in Bastards about King Kong with the card game.
Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
Thinking about creatures that are apes.
Yeah.
When I first read that scene about was I brought in chains, was I brought in slavery.
Yeah.
It's so obvious now, but I had never put King Kong in that context.
I don't know how you can.
I had never thought about it. I'd see, to me, as a kid, it's the monster on top of the Empire State Building.
As a kid, I had never
thought.
As a child, I wasn't thinking about the slavery metaphor there. No, it was.
Was that one of your favorite films?
Yeah, it absolutely was. Yeah, he was a big monkey, and I loved that big monkey. The movie would have to be more about a big monkey for it to have the pop cultural resonance that it has, and the purchase that it has over the years. To me, once I became of age and I could see it, it's a complete metaphor for the tribulations of the black male in American white society.
Weaving it in the card game in Inglourious Bastards.
But,
Which
you know,
is,
by the way-
I think a lot of people saw Bastards and went, I know a lot of people watched Inglourious Bastards, and after that card game where he talks about King Kong and he through the guessing, people went back and they rewatched the film in a way that they never had before.
Well,
but you
I'm
felt
sure there's
for
quite
it.
a few subtextual writers who've written about it before Bastards.
But a lot of people aren't reading those writers.
No, I agree.
A lot of people, I'm not saying that you were the first one to write about it, but you were the first one to put it in a pop culture movie that has nothing to do with King Kong or subtextual slavery. You're just watching this war movie and suddenly you get this nugget of information that really stuck with a lot of people.
One of the things I think that's actually truly great about King Kong is I almost think it's and again, what actually makes this so meaningful is how much time and work was put into the movie to say that it's an accidental classic, a movie that required so much work. But I do think it is an accidental classic. The things that make King Kong truly great, I don't think are coming from Ernest B. and Marion C., the co-directors. I think they are coming from Great White Hunter racist vibe, which would fit in with the movies that they did before this. They're going into uncharted territory and filming these exotic lands, whether it be the Orient or Africa, very much making them, this is not civilization, these are the others, and aren't these others fascinating? And they're so not us.
So it was their inherent racism, or whatever that was.
Rather than put it on them, but I do think that that is a bit of the case. I think Carl Denham is them, and he is coming from a completely different place than where the soul of the movie is. They don't treat the natives with utter and complete contempt, but they treat them as non-human others, maybe not completely wrapped up in contempt, but they are treated as others to not be necessarily considered in any way, shape, or form. That's why they lead Kong right back to them. Even if you look at the relation, and just, the way they just kill everything that comes in their path, like great white hunters, without any worry about what they're doing in this island and how they're doing it. They're very bloodthirsty, especially considering that they're movie makers, not even hunters. They're just trying to make a movie. Even if you look at the entire buried inside of the idea that the natives have created a relationship with Kong, that Kong is smart enough. He's not just a wild creature that doesn't know anything. Him and the natives have a deal that every few years they will offer up one of their women to Kong to be a bride. It's not suggested that Kong eats these women. All right, they are made the bride of Kong. Now, what that means, you can
infer whatever
they don't know, and who knows. But you see that there is a black young lady that's a member of the natives who's being prepared to be his bride. She's not terrified. She's accepted her place. It would suggest that it's an honor to be selected as Kong's bride. She is not, she seems rather comfortable with the whole idea. It's not like she's going to be eaten. She doesn't come from that point of view. This is an understanding that the natives and Kong have developed with each other. There is a thinking brain inside of Kong that over the course of time has been reasoned with the people. So you have that going on. One of the things that actually bothered me when I was a kid, and I think still bothers people to this day, of how Kong defends Fay Wray at every step of the way. And she never appreciates it. She never sees it for what it is. She's terrified by the pterodactyls. She's terrified by the Tyrannosaurus Rex or whatever it is that he fights. But she's equally terrified by Kong. She never appreciates what
he's defending her,
what he's done, what he does for her, and how he does it. So I think the true auteur of King Kong is Willis O'Brien, because if you look at the original posters of King Kong, Kong is far more a monster. And like he has teeth that like almost like saber-toothed tiger. Canine. All right. And I'm sure every sketch, every drawing was done as a more monstrous Kong. That is how Marion C. and Ernest B. thought about it. But then Willis got a hold of it. And Willis got rid of all the monstrous touches. Almost every monstrous touch that is drawn and written for Kong is gone. And the whole idea, Willis, was to make him as human as possible. And especially filmed in black and white photography, if you're gonna make Kong as human as possible, it looks like a black male. They do everything they can to reduce the simian features and make them as human as possible. And they give him human-like emotions mixed with an ape's body language. But the emotions are the emotions of a human. And the face recognition is the face of a human. And so we respond to Kong not as a monster, but as a true character. We respond to him as a human character. That is why that movie is not just a movie about a giant monkey. It's a character that has survived since the 30s as a pop cultural icon. Each remake of it comes out and within 10 years is made obsolete, because all their special effects have moved on and now it's a whole different thing. But the original King Kong always will be a go-to to both film fans, children seeing the movie, anything.
I mean, it's interesting, there's two approaches to monsters. You can humanize the monster, or the monster can be monstrous, it can be the worst part of ourselves. If you look at King Kong with a giant ape, then Hitchcock's The Birds, there's so many of them, they almost have no personality, but they're just relentless. I remember the first time I saw The Birds with the school kids getting attacked. That was the most upsetting thing for me.
That was very scary.
But then when you put, I remember Rod in Glorious Bastards, that was one of the coolest touches. But when they go to the diner and the woman starts, "You brought this upon us," like making the audience complicit. One of the most brilliant touches.
Right, absolutely.
Ask me that again.
Okay, what would you consider in the history of horror films the 5 best performances? It can be man and woman.
I mean, okay. Well, the
supporting lead.
It's interesting because I think of iconic characters. Like I think of Elsa Lanchester in Bride of Frankenstein. Whereas I don't think of that necessarily as brilliant acting, but it's
she's an icon.
But she's an icon. Where you can't think of any.
But that's not quite the same thing.
Well, okay, with the best performances. The best performances where you watch an actress, I would say, and it's not in order. Linda Blair, The Exorcist, Sissy Spacek, Carrie.
I'll go for both of those.
Dee Wallace and Cujo.
I read that review, but I don't agree with it. But I mean, it's a fantastic performance. I don't think you can put her up with Boris Karloff, all right, as...
No, okay, Boris Karloff is Frankenstein, Bela Lugosi.
Bela Lugosi wouldn't make my list.
He wouldn't make your list, okay.
No, Christopher Lee would make it, but I don't think, I don't know if I would... I would pick Peter Cushing as Dr. Frankenstein before I pick...
I would pick Gunnar Hansen as Leatherface, for sure. I mean, it's hard because you think of, do I think Nick Castle as Michael Myers? But then I think the head turns, the body language.
I don't know if she'd make number 5, but I think you could consider Jamie Lee Curtis.
For sure, Jamie Lee Curtis.
But then also, but it's not as good as Mia Farrow.
It's not as good as Mia Farrow, but Mia Farrow. But to me, I have different standards. Like to me, it's not as good as Bruce Campbell, as Ash. What he goes through in Evil Dead, that physical.
Especially when you add Evil Dead 2, when you have the whole thing and the slapstick comedy. All right,
it's just like, it would have to be Linda Blair. I mean, can we say Robert Shaw in Jaws? Of course you can. But is that going to be?
I think you're pushing it when it comes to.
That's like really great actors in a really good role in a movie. But Jack Nicholson in The Shining is another one of my favorites.
Well, that definitely counts.
It.
That counts. Okay. So what are the 5?
Okay, Jack Nicholson in The Shining, Linda Blair in The Exorcist,
Sissy Spacek and Carrie.
Jack Nicholson, Linda Blair, Bruce Campbell, and then I just I love Gunnar Hansen or Boris Karloff. This is really hard.
Oh, wow. I mean,
yes. Okay, fine.
Well, I don't know. You don't got to do anything. All right.
Yeah, Boris Karloff as Frankenstein for sure.
Mm-hmm. All 3 of the movies, yeah.
I said Jack Nicholson. And then maybe Robert Englund as Freddy in Nightmare on Elm Street.
I think you're giving him a little bit more credit, but I'll buy that. That works. That absolutely works.
Felissa Rose in Sleepaway Camp.
I actually think Heather Langenkamp is actually better than Robert Englund in that movie.
Heather Langenkamp's amazing. Heather Langenkamp's. We interviewed her.
But would I put her over?
Would you put her over Mia Farrow and Mia Farrow?
No, I wouldn't. No way would I put her over Mia Farrow.
No, Mia Farrow's too good in Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, exactly.
What are yours?
No way
What would you do?
Put her over. I think you got to go with Linda Blair for sure. Huh? My question is, when do you stop counting Boris Karloff? Because Boris Karloff is just so great. So yeah, you can say Boris Karloff as the monster, but then you could also say Boris Karloff in 5 other movies as well. All right. Okay, we'll keep it to 1 role per hit. I think we have a lot of the same. I think it would be Linda Blair, Sissy Spacek, Boris Karloff as the monster. I guess I have to go with Mia Farrow. So then
the last one, is it Bruce Campbell? Is it Jack Nicholson? Is it Heather Langenkamp?
No, I know Bruce Campbell comes close.
Betsy Palmer?
No, I wouldn't think Betsy Palmer.
Jamie Lee Curtis?
I'm going to regret this later, but I'm going to say Jamie Lee Curtis.
Why are you going to regret it?
Because I'm sure I'm going to come up with 2 that are like, oh my God, why didn't I say that?
Okay, but now we can just go, okay, is it Tippi Hedren in The Birds or Janet Leigh in Psycho? Or Norma, Tony Perkins?
Okay.
We forgot about Tony Perkins.
Fuck Janet Leigh in Psycho, but Anthony Perkins is my 5th.
Anthony Perkins. Yeah. But Anthony Perkins begats Janet Leigh, which begat Jamie Lee Curtis.
Janet Leigh can hold a flickering birthday candle to Tony Perkins.
No, of course not. But I'm saying, without Tony Perkins' performance, we wouldn't have the shower scene. We wouldn't have Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah, okay, but we're talking about performance-wise.
Performance-wise, Anthony. Yeah.
I mean, the fact in real life, Janet Leigh is only okay in that movie, and she was nominated for Best Supporting Actress, and Anthony Perkins wasn't nominated.
He wasn't?
No, he wasn't.
Do you remember?
So you can't even say, oh my God, I can't believe Anthony Perkins wasn't nominated. And then you realize, oh, it's worse than that. Janet Leigh was.
But what about...
And I actually think maybe his best performance is he's maybe even a little better in Psycho 2.
Richard Frank, yes, of course. Halloween. We got to mention Jamie Lee Curtis' performance in Halloween. No, 19 years old, and with who her mom is, she comes in and gives one of the great performances ever.
She's amazing. One of the, she truly started the final girl. Mm-hmm. The real final girl aspect, all right? And she carries that movie on her broad shoulders. Frankly, to tell you the truth, if Jamie Lee Curtis were to make the top 5 or extended to 6, it would be her performance in Halloween H2O.
Really?
I tried to talk Bob Weinstein into pushing for an Oscar campaign for her in Halloween H2O. I thought she was amazingly terrific in that movie. She didn't have anything to prove anymore. She was already a star. She was already an icon. She had grown into her persona in this really cool way. And watching this grown woman deal with Michael Myers was pretty terrific. I thought she was fantastic in that movie. And it was as if it truly felt, unlike other movies, it truly felt like a full circle had come. The only...
Well, she's in the new one, the David Gordon Green one.
That's what I hear.
Playing Laurie Strode.
That's what I hear. The only taint, and it does have a taint, all right, and Kim Newman, the genre critic, agrees with me, that in Halloween 2, Deborah Hill and John Carpenter do the cheapest thing just to throw a little whammy in the movie, and they make it that Laurie and Michael Myers are brother and sister. And that taints every single Halloween sequel that happens afterwards, because he's not her brother. She's not his sister. That's just bullshit. That literally was them coming up with a stupid idea at the last minute.
Well, it's their Empire Strikes Back. I'm your father.
Yeah, but it's the cheapest thing. Nobody was coming from that point of view when they were making the first one. And what makes the first one so good is the fact that you don't know what it is that makes Michael Myers go,
Lock in.
her.
Yeah.
It's not a sister thing. Frankly, I think when it comes to child performances, one of the best child performances in any horror film, right up there with...
Patty Duke in The Bad Seed.
Patty Duke in The Bad... No, that's Patty McCormick in The Bad Seed.
Patty McCormick in The Bad Seed.
And then there's that really cool young girl that's in Curse of the Cat People. She's terrific, too. Danielle Harris.
Yeah,
In Halloween's 4 and 5, all right, as the thing. But she's terrific in it. But it's tainted, because everything is working from the assumption. And same thing with H2O. Everything is working from the assumption that Laurie and Michael Myers are brother and sister, and that's just cockamamie bullshit. That's not what it is.
I want to talk about the latest horror phenomenon that is now the highest grossing R-rated horror movie of all time, It. Did you see it? What was it about It that do you think caught fire? Because to me, it was not the scariest movie.
No, it definitely
but the opening, that opening of It.
Well, the opening is a masterpiece.
The opening of It.
The sewer sequence, there is a reason why it's like the scene that created 1,000 parodies, because it's that good. And it becomes that recognizable. No, the opening scene is a masterpiece. I don't think the movie, I only think the movie's okay.
But what is it about the clown? The clown, the monster.
But your first question was, why is it that
why is it the highest grossing horror film?
Well, why did it catch on? Why did
Yeah.
it catch on and really become a thing? I think it is actually the fact that as time has gone on, it's the book. I think as time has gone on, even more people have read the book, and the book has actually reached a classic status that it didn't have in '88. And it's one of those books that even if you didn't read it, you heard about it.
Yeah.
You knew somebody who read it. You might know somebody who was reading it. You know, oh my God! Then this is where I'm at now. Ooh la la! You know, and without anyone paying attention, other than the people that decided to make the movie, no one realized the pop cultural currency that Pennywise had, and the entire concept of it had. I never read the book. When I watched it, I was like surprised. Oh, okay, well. Yeah, I can see that the guy who wrote, The Body, AKA Stand By Me, well, this is that writer, and then he's adding a thing to it, but I think it's very naked what it is. It's like It is basically Stephen King saw Nightmare on Elm Street and did his ripoff of it. The book It is Stephen King's ripoff of Nightmare on Elm Street. You know, he just replaces Freddy Krueger with Pennywise. And it's just exactly like, oh, okay, he sees Nightmare on Elm Street. Oh, wow, that's a really neat idea. Oh, that's really clever. Okay, that's cool. Well, let me take that idea and let me do my version of it. Now, his version of it is going to be a 560-page novel as opposed to one-dimensional characters, at the most two-dimensional characters. He's going to have four-dimensional characters. And the whole history of every one of them, as far as the kids and their relationships with their parents and their parents' relationships in the town, and the whole town will be a thing. He's a terrific writer in that regard. So he fills it full of minutia, and he fills it full of his good prose, and he fills it full of his good writing, which is what Wes Craven didn't have. Take away all that cake frosting and all the little frosting flowers that are put on it and all that. It's basically a ripoff of Nightmare on Elm Street.
Interesting.
Just baked inside of
this
a
beautiful,
gigantic
1,000-page cake.
1,000-page cake. Yeah, but the thing is also in the movie's a little dull. All right, at a certain point, those kids aren't that interesting. Mm-hmm. I didn't quite buy their final triumph over Pennywise that much. Now, if you've talked to anybody who's read the books, now I'm just repeating what they're saying. I haven't read the book. Everyone acknowledges that splitting it in two was really kind of the only way to go about trying to tell the story. However, anyone who's read the book says it's a travesty to the book because it's the juxtaposition between the adults versus the kids, and the adults and back and forth is what makes the book so readable and what makes the book so good. It's structure itself that made the book such a beloved horror novel. But the movie can't do that. Having said all of that, I only thought the movie was okay. And I didn't really care that much for any of those kids. I'm really looking forward to the sequel. I want to see how the story ends. I haven't read the book. I'm really curious on who they cast as the adults with the kids. And I really do want to see how it turns out. And I don't know anything about how it turns out, but I have been told that it's far more horrible than I could have ever imagined, that what happens to the adults is truly fucked up, and that's almost unimaginable. And I've considered watching the miniseries so I can just see how it ends and not have to wait for the other movie, but I think I'm going to hold out for the next movie.
All right. And the last thing, I think of horror as the purest, I don't know if you do, I think of horror as the purest form of cinema, because it's one of those genres where you can get away without logic and just imagery. It represents our nightmares. Is there one thing you think about horror as to why people just love it and why it is the genre that truly never dies?
I don't think most people are walking around thinking about this, but I agree with you. I mean, there is an aspect to horror that it is, there's a pure cinema aspect to it. The camera is important. It's cinema. It's not just about shooting the dialogue. You've got to create a mood. You have to create a setting. And the camera can be another character. And I'm not just even talking about whipped POV shots. I'm just saying the camera is important. I don't think Brian De Palma is quite as enamored with Hitchcock as people say he's enamored with Hitchcock. He was enamored with Hitchcock's cinematic vocabulary. And he was a student of that cinematic vocabulary. And he started his career making counterculture hippie movies. And he read the writing on the wall very quickly that was dead by 1970. De Palma has been very conscious about not wanting to make art films and then not being allowed to make movies. He knew he needed to make movies in a commercial genre. So what would that commercial genre be? One can imagine action films to some degree. I mean, I can imagine a Brian De Palma Rolling Thunder. I can imagine a Brian De Palma Freebie and the Bean. I mean, I can imagine some of those with Brian De Palma, but I don't think De Palma knew what that commercial thing was, the commercial genre he could thrive in. De Palma doesn't really seem that overly enamored of too many of his contemporary filmmakers. I think when Brian De Palma saw Polanski's Repulsion, I think he was gobsmacked. I think he watched Repulsion, which was sold like Psycho, not since Psycho. That was the tagline, not since Psycho. Have you seen something like this? And by the way, it wasn't exactly like Hammer horror films weren't coming out with a not since Psycho. Forget about William Castle. William Castle and Hammer were coming out with Psycho ripoffs left, right, and center for the next 8 years. But there was something different about Repulsion. And when he saw Repulsion, it was like, oh wow, this little Polish fucker has cracked the code. He's figured out how to make a Hitchcockian thriller, but for a new, more sophisticated, younger audience. Hitchcock's films hinted at being disturbing. They glanced at being disturbing. The point of Polanski was for it to be disturbing. It was Hitchcock by way of Buñuel, with a great actress director attached to it. All right, so you have this magnificent performance from Catherine Deneuve right at the center of it. Then add to the fact that all of this disturbingness is gonna lead to a grislier outcome and a more graphic outcome. than a Hitchcock movie ever would. So I think he saw Repulsion and he was like, wow, this guy figured it out. He completely figured it out. This is Hitchcock for a new audience. This is Hitchcock for a new age. He's made it very clear that he thinks everything that Hitchcock did after Psycho can be thrown in the garbage, including the birds. He's like, oh, this guy figured it out. And then when he turns around and makes Rosemary's Baby, then De Palma's like, oh, well, that's that. Well, that's that then. Okay. There's a new master of macabre, and his name is Roman Polanski. That is what time it is. This guy is the guy. Then what happens next? The Manson family. And they kill his wife, and they kill his unborn child. And as Don McLean would say about Bob Dylan, the jester is on the sidelines wearing a cast. So he's out of the picture. And in 1970, Dario Argento comes out with The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. I'm positive that De Palma does not put Argento in the same category he puts Polanski. I'm sure he thinks he's schlocky. Having said that, again, Bird with the Crystal Plumage was sold at not since Psycho kind of thing with the graphics and everything. And again, all leading towards a more disturbing thing than Hitchcock would ever do. All leading to a more graphic outcome. The graphicness that was always implied in a Hitchcock movie is now shown in an Argento movie. And what Argento, I'm sure as far as De Palma was concerned, what Argento did right, as opposed to Truffaut and Chabrol, which I'm sure De Palma would consider thrill-less thrillers. Oh, the idea to do Hitchcock is to follow his plots, not his set pieces. Forget that. Was Argento did do set pieces. He did Hitchcockian set pieces inside of the movie, and he pulled them off, and it was a smash. Well, you know, or in exploitation circles, it was a smash. So, with Polanski showing the way, and him, well, I guess that's the guy, but now the guy is taken out of the picture.
Through tragedy.
Through tragedy.
So he stops making movies for the unforeseeable time.
Yeah. Tragedy, he's sidelined, truly sidelined. You know, a great football player, his knee shattered. He's off on the sidelines. Picking up where Polanski left off, again with the Psycho thing, and pulling it off, is Argento. And that leaves a commercial place for De Palma. And so he writes his Psycho, and that's Sisters. And AIP releases it, and now, you know, the commercial genre, at that point, horror film / thriller, but in the case of Sisters, it's sold more like a horror film. That's a commercial niche for him. And part of the thing is, because of Hitchcock, people will accept cinema first in a thriller, in a way they won't accept it in a love story, in a way they won't accept it in a period drama, in a way they won't accept it in almost most every other genre. Because Hitchcock taught people to be thinking of cinema first in terms of a thriller. We're just naturally okay with the camera taking off and doing things.
And De Palma, as much of a result of Polanski, and Polanski being taken out of the game.
That's my feeling. That's my speculation.
And then there's De Palma, then you're influenced by De Palma, and then you take that cinematic approach and apply it to all genres while cross-pollinating genres.
Yes. But never in the straight-up thriller mode, all right, the way De Palma did. Or even in the horror film mode for the most part.
The techniques that De Palma applied to a thriller, you applied to a drama.
Yes, exactly. I was arguably as influenced by De Palma's visual style as he was influenced by Hitchcock's visual style.
Amazing. And I was influenced by your style. And that's how we get Hostel too.
Yeah, there you go.
Awesome. And a lot of horror sequels are terrible and get a bad rap, and for good reason. But I want to focus on the sequels that are awesome and the sequels that don't suck.
Right,
And some of them are maybe more well-known than others, but I want to know, just sort of in general, is there a secret? What do you think makes a good horror sequel?
A good horror sequel is like any good genre film sequel, all right, where it's like you enjoyed what you saw the last time, and it has characters, in the case of Axel Foley, who's the hero, all right, in Beverly Hills Cop 2, all right, or a monster, like the shark in Jaws. And so it has some iconic character, iconic setup that you want to experience again, and you want to get all the pleasures of the film from the first time. Everything that worked for the character in the horror sequel, anything that worked for the monster, worked for the character, or worked for the mythology that they were creating. But frankly, you want it to be better. I mean, that's one of the reasons why most sequels don't work, because it feels like it should be better, not lesser. Even when it's okay. Even when it's like, okay, well, it's not as good as the first one. But yeah, it wasn't bad. That seems bad.
Well, there's certain films that it's almost like the second movie wasn't so great or wasn't as good as the first one. And then the third one, like Nightmare on Elm Street 3, suddenly reinvents the franchise. And becomes
A case can be made for Freddy's Nightmares, all right? You know, the homosexual subtext in Freddy's Nightmares is a case to be made.
I for sure. I'm a defender of Nightmare on Elm Street 2, but I thought that Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, was when the series, Freddy started making more of the puns.
Well, you're right. No, Dream Warriors managed to click into the mythology of the first one in a way that was exciting for audiences, but it also seemed on a slightly bigger canvas. It had like a little better actors in it, and the cast was a little bit more prestigious. And because of part 2, you were surprised by the bigness and the sense of fun. I remember like halfway through seeing Nightmare on Elm Street 3, watching Craig Wasson do one of his scenes, and all of a sudden you realize you're in a dream. I think when the balls, when the pop balls will disappear and you realize you're in a dream. I was like, I remember thinking, well, they're doing a really good job with this. This is like a better movie than I thought it was going to be. It was neat. A good example of a horror sequel, not that's a great horror sequel, but it's a fun movie, but it can't compete with the original, but it's still a fun movie on its own for what it is Damien, Omen 2.
Yes.
But in describing the difference between Omen 1 and Omen 2, you can kind of describe what's the problem with a lot of sequels. Because the thing about The Omen, now it might be hard to remember because The Omen has become so famous. So if you've never seen The Omen before, you've probably heard that it's a movie about a boy who's going to be the Antichrist. You've probably heard about that. But when you saw the movie in 1976, you didn't exactly know that. They didn't say that in the TV spots. They didn't say that in the trailers. There was something going on. They alluded to it, but they didn't say this is a movie about a boy who is the coming of the Antichrist. They did not specifically say it. They talked about 666, they talked about stuff like that, but they were very obscure about what the actual plot of the movie was. So when you went to the movie theaters to see The Omen, you were in a similar situation to Gregory Peck. He spends the first half of the movie, more than the first half of the movie,
figuring it out,
trying to figure out, putting the mystery together. And it's not the kind of movie where it's like, oh man, 10 minutes in, you know exactly what's going on, and you got to wait 45 minutes for Gregory Peck to figure it out. No, you're learning with him what the deal is. And then by the time they go to that cemetery, now you know what's going on. You have actually caught up with the movie. And then it has that scary sequence with the Rottweilers, and now you're all in. So from that point on, you know, that's what the movie's about, and you're watching it, leading to him taking the child to that church altar. Damien, Omen 2 is different, because we already know Damien's the Antichrist. So the whole movie is people finding out that Damien's the Antichrist, and then they die.
And then he kills
them. Yeah, and then somebody else finds out Damien's the Antichrist, and then they die. All right, and we just sit around and wait for William Holden to figure it all out.
Right, but we're so ahead of him. But I remember watching Meshack Taylor get the bifurcation, getting severed in half. That was one of my favorite. The cable kill in the elevator, and the kid under the ice.
I didn't say Omen 2 is a bad movie. It's just simple by comparison because you know it going in. You know, and that's when the Omen movie started resembling the Friday the 13th movies, because it started becoming more about the kills, because it's always these people figuring it out. But look, no, the guy getting cut with the cable, you know, that they had. I liked the idea that they felt that they had to come up with something parallel with the pane of glass.
With the glass.
Cutting off David Warner's head. And actually, they kind of did. they kind of did.
I thought so too. I mean, you're watching it, you're thinking about the first movie, and they're thinking, what if we just did an entire body chopped in half? And it was really, really one of the best sequences.
Knowing that they had that to live up to, I think they did a pretty good job of...
Yeah, and the kid under the ice, the birthday party, was the most disturbing thing. That was like following the ice.
The same thing follows in the Jaws sequel. because it's like, okay, it's just another shark. And then we're going to watch 4, 5, or 6 random attacks and everything. And then Murray Hamilton is going to say, don't close the beach again. And then Brody's going to have to go out there and fight this beast again. Now, having said that, I actually think Jaws 2 the ending is horrible. The ending of Jaws 2 is horrible. What ruins Jaws 2 is the way they kill the shark. It's just so ridiculous.
The way he jumps in the electrocution line. And
yeah,
the
exactly.
Line
I keep waiting for Fonzie to water ski over him, all right?
It's literally a movie that jumps the shark.
It
Jaws
literally
2 actually
jumps the shark. I mean, but the shark looks the same as the one from Happy Days. All right, the beach looks the same. I totally expect to see Fonzie flying over the climax.
Yeah, no, this is the shark jumps. It's like worse than jumps. It's the shark jumps.
Yeah. But Jonas Schwartz actually did a pretty good job up until that time, all right, by spacing out the attacks. And he has the one attack that's terrific, the one with Ann Dusenberry, where it's like the young guy and the girl and the sailboat.
Yeah, the sailboat's a great one, the two-runner things.
That attack is good enough to be in the first movie. You know, where the shark gets the guy and like heads towards the boat. That's good enough to be in the first movie. That's the one attack sequence that is good as the first film. That literally could have been in the first movie. But the thing about it is Jaws was much more than random attacks by the shark until they finally get their shit together to attack him. You know, it had all this characterization, and it had all this comedy, and it had these 3 magnificent characters, and it was about their fighting and their bonding. And so it was just much more than all of that. However, even for people who put down Jaws 2, there is something kind of great in Jaws 2 that can't be denied, and that is getting to watch Roy Scheider play his iconic character, Matt Brody, all right, one more time, just to see him, like, you know, be in the uniform and, like, you know,
to watch him as Chief Brody.
Yeah, playing that iconic character, one more chance at it is pretty cool.
You know, you have the 2 most iconic horror movies are Jaws and Psycho. One has a sequel that's not great, but Psycho 2, Richard Franklin manages to make what I thought we were all surprised. You didn't think they could make a sequel to Psycho. And I remember I loved it when I saw it.
Oh, well, I mean, Richard Franklin had everything going against him when he did the Psycho 2 sequel, because in a strange way, back in that time in the 80s, Psycho was even more revered than it is now. And Hitchcock was definitely more revered than he is now. By the 80s, Hitchcock was treated like some sort of cinematic saint. So the idea of remaking a Hitchcock film, or the idea, even though there was quite a few of them out there, The 39 Steps had just been remade, The Lady Vanishes had just been remade.
The idea of sequelizing a Hitchcock icon was unthinkable.
Yeah, well, the idea of remaking, but especially sequelizing, people talked about it like sacrilege. I mean, to the degree, I think I remember on the Tom Snyder show, a 3-way conversation between David Cronenberg, Jonas Schwartz, and John Carpenter. And they're talking about the state of horror films. And then they mention, what do you think about the Psycho sequel coming out? And they were like, oh, I wouldn't touch that. I wouldn't touch it. Well, you're going to try to be better than Hitch? Forget about it. I did not feel that way. One, because I'm not as enamored with Hitchcock as everybody else is, nor am I that enamored with, nor am I overly enamored with Psycho. But I was enamored with Richard Franklin. He was my favorite of all the Australian directors. He was the Australian Hitchcock. And I had seen his film Patrick, and I had seen his film Road Games. I even saw one of his sex films, True Story of Eskimo Nell. And Road Games, to this day, is my favorite Australian film. Not just horror film, my favorite Australian film. And Brian De Palma had really created a genre unto himself of these Hitchcock-like thrillers. And Road Games was the best non-De Palma Hitchcock-like thrillers in the 80s. And there was a lot of Hitchcock-like thrillers, because working at a video store, like, customers love that stuff. So whenever we got a Hitchcockian type of movie, but there was a new movie, we always pushed it. And the audience really loved it, whether it was William Fruit's Bedroom Eyes or the Wheat Brothers' Lies. I mean, they ever went, oh, wow, that's a Hitchcock kind of film? Yeah, I'll give that a shot. Well, Road Games was one of the best. So the idea that Richard Franklin was now he's got the opportunity to do the second story. And I met Richard Franklin at the time that he was making the movie. I asked him, I go, what are your ambitions for the movie? I mean, it does seem like everybody wants it to fail. Everyone, like, they resent it. They think it's sacrilege. How are you handling that? And he goes, well, people are going to say whatever they're going to say, but hopefully when they see the movie, they'll feel different. And I go, well, what are your hopes for it? He goes, well, my hopes for it is that you like the first movie and that you'll like the second movie. And maybe 10 years from now or 15 years from now, you'll think about a scene from one or the other one, but you won't exactly remember which one you were thinking about because it's just all the Norman Bates story. And that's what he did. He didn't just interject, okay, Norman Bates, the killer, is back. He made it the Norman Bates story. And Norman Bates was the actual hero of the story. And I think not only do I think Anthony Perkins is even better, as great as he is in Psycho, I think he's even better in Psycho 2. I think it's one of the great lead performances in any horror film ever made, his performance in Psycho 2. I mean, it's just a magnificent performance. You bought a ticket to see a boogeyman, and now, from the moment he shows up with Robert Loggia, who normally is so abrasive, it is like the best, it's like the coolest psychiatrist in the history of movies in that movie. You're like, Robert Loggia? Yeah, really, he is.
Yeah, Loggia's great.
But when the minute they show up and they talk and everything, all of a sudden now you are rooting for Norman. You're rooting for Norman to keep it together. You're rooting for Norman to be sane, to be happy. You're actually rooting for him to be happy. And now you don't want any of the horror stuff to happen. And me and my friends, we liked it so much that, like, we got into a passionate discussion about it afterwards. And you know what? He would have been okay. If that damn bitch would have left him alone, he would have been okay.
Well, it's interesting because then they would Psycho 3 and Psycho 4 and Bates Motel. I mean, Norman Bates became, one of the most fascinating and like kind of beloved movie characters. And I mean, I think after the sequels, the effect that the monsters have is that they become beloved. I think once you've seen Freddy after Nightmare on Elm Street 3, you love him. You can't wait for him to make jokes. And by the time you're at Friday the 13th Part 6, you just want to see Jason chop up those kids. Like you can't get enough of him. It's interesting that the horror villains, I think one of the seminal sequels is Friday the 13th Part 3 for a number of reasons. I love that in Part 2, they just went to Bay of Blood and they just took, Twitch of the Death Nerve and they just used that formula. But, they just completely, Steve Miner just completely ups the body count with just more and more ridiculous deaths. But it is Part 3. I remember with Part 3, just the very concept of it is like, well, didn't they kill him? Haven't they killed him twice? Don't they? Okay, they got away with it in the first one. All right, well, for sure they killed him in the second one. How's he going to be there? And then at a certain point, they're like, yeah, he's Jason. You can't kill him. Like that I don't remember that being in a concept in movies before Friday the 13th Part 3. And audiences not caring, going, well, it's Jason. He can always come back from the grave. But people forget, like you said with Richard Franklin, about not being able to know the difference between Psycho 1 and Psycho 2. People forget the mask didn't come in until Part 3.
Oh, yeah. Well, they forget Jason's not in the first one.
Yeah, exactly. Until the last shot.
Yeah.
Until the last shot. But that Part 3, do you remember seeing Part 3? And then even Part 13, Part 4, I thought was an excellent film.
No, well, of the sequels, I think Part 4 is the class act. That's the one.
Yeah, and with Corey Feldman's performance. Oh,
he's terrific in it. He steals the show. He's awesome.
I remember that ending scene with him shaving the head and coming out was chilling.
Oh, yeah. All the kids in that one are terrific. I mean, it's like an all-star cast of like exploitation movies from the 80s. Because like, oh, hey, there's Judy Aronson from American Ninja. Oh, hey, there's Crispin Glover from this thing. Oh, hey, it's the guy from Last American Virgin. Hey, it's Kimberly Beck. Hey, Peter Barton from Hell Night. Hey, guy. Hey, Peter Barton.
They're all together. It's true. It's like a who's who of horror in one film. Well, Joseph Zito. I mean, his kills in The Prowler, Missing in Action. I mean, like Joseph Zito could do no wrong in my book. He's just one of my favorite directors. But yeah, no, I think about that. Like that Friday the 13th Part 3, doing it in 3D was just such a great gimmick. But I remember after that, it was like, because Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, which was just one of the most confusing. As a kid, I love it now, but as a kid, you were just like, is Michael Myers going to come out of one of these masks?
Well, it's one of those things where, like, I knew Michael Myers wasn't going to be in the movie because I read the literature about it, and I was still disappointed that he wasn't in the movie. I knew going in, but the movie, what they gave me, wasn't good enough as far as I was concerned.
Right. We went on the Atkins diet for that one.
Much to my chagrin, I can still sing the Shamrock damn jingle.
8 more days till Halloween. We always do it. But I think we all do it. Anyone who's of that age that saw that movie, 8 days until Halloween, we always like text each other, you know, on the 23rd of October, that's when the texts are flying around with friends singing 8 more days till Halloween.
But what you're talking about is just, I think, du jour for the majority of most horror sequels, because it's not the situation where most horror films have heavy characters or heavy landscape that deserves a trilogy, not just a part 2 and a part 3. But no, there's much more to be mined here. We can go much further with this. I mean, now Dawn of the Dead is one that does that. It creates a wonderful mythology, and it can go further with it. And the further you go, the more, it brings up even more questions, and the more you want to know, okay, well, what did they do 10 years after that? Well, what happens 10 more years after that? Okay, is there anybody in a safe situation? It's one of the few horror films that offers up that kind of thing. But because what you're describing, where it's like, well, at a certain point, well, it's Michael Myers, so of course they can't kill him. Oh, it's Jason, so of course they can't kill him. So with the Romero movies, there's a mythology there to explore. Night of the Living Dead, it's everybody, it just happened, and so they're trapped in a house. Dawn of the Dead, now it's happened all over the place, and now what do the survivors do? Day of the Dead, now it's just the way of the world, all right? And it's been 2 years or so, and now the survivors are living underground. That whole rodeo system that they use in Day of the Dead to corral the zombies in order to capture them and do their experiments on them. I go, wow, that's really clever. That's probably how something like that would work. You're always surprised by that. But in the case of just exactly like what you said with Michael Myers or Jason, and then it's everybody is like, oh, well, it's Jason, so of course they can't kill him. And Jason shows up, yeah, man, okay, well, I'm gonna make a bet. First kill's gonna happen at minute 12. No, man, first murder's gonna happen at minute 17.
Well, it's also like once he was using a Roman candle by part 5, he was like, oh, he just couldn't go to the hardware store. He's just completely out of weapons. But that was the fun, was seeing what Jason was gonna kill them with next.
Yeah, but the thing is, it suggests that everything becomes less serious, all right? It's not a mythology they're mining. They're just getting more juvenile. They can deliver a good version of that, but it's still more juvenile. And I like them, but similar to what happened with the Universal Frankenstein movies. The first 3 were special, all right? The first 3 told an overarching story. But then when it get into Ghost of Frankenstein and House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula and Frankenstein versus the Wolfman, which I'm a big fan of, then it's like, now they're making them for the kids. By the time they do Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, well, that's already your audience by that point. They could have done Kids in Play, all right, meet Jason.
Yeah, well, they sent him to space. Well, once Jason goes to space and it's Jason,
yeah.
When you're Jason X and Jason in outer space, it becomes like the Leprechaun sequels.
Yeah, so it's just a natural dumbing down for kids and for a teenage audience. It's not Fistful of Dollars, where, no, this is a great iconic character and this is a mythological take on the West that we want to see explored in bigger and bigger canvases.
Another one that I remember seeing and loving, even though it was tonally completely different from the first one, was Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which I remember seeing from the poster. I was like, I couldn't believe there was a sequel being made. I remember I was about 14 years old when it came out. I was so excited. And then I'm looking at the poster, I'm like, is that the poster for The Breakfast Club?
Yeah.
And you're like, why is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 using the poster of The Breakfast Club? What is this movie going to be? And it was totally nuts and over the top. I loved it. I mean, Bill Moseley's Chop Top. It was a completely different film. They changed Leatherface. I was fighting it at first. Dennis Hopper, bring it all down. But I thought it was a charming movie. It wasn't a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, but I liked it.
I liked it when it came out because I really, really, really wanted to like it. Because also I was a big fan of the screenwriter L.M. Kit Carson. And,
yeah, L.M. Kit Carson, sure.
And I really wanted to see Tobe Hooper do something really good. I mean, look, I don't like it. I think it's silly. I mean, the only part about it I really like is that one scene with Chop Top talking as he's
eating he's burning parts of the scalp.
No, that's a really creepy. But I never need to see it again. I mean, I saw it twice at the theaters, and I was like, first, second time, I was like, nah. Look, we all acted like we liked it more than we did, but I was a little.
Yeah, I mean, I still like the poster, but
No,
that's probably what I like the most out of it.
One of the sequels that I was really caught unawares by that I thought was, wow, that was pretty good. And it's a sequel to movies that I'm politically 100% against. So I don't even know how I ended up even seeing the sequel. But I never saw the first Return of the Living Dead movie. And I never saw Return of the Living Dead 2. Because I don't like Dan O'Bannon. And I thought it was sacrilege that, he's trying to jump on the bandwagon the same year that Romero is doing Day of the Dead, and the whole idea of the zombies only eat brains. Well, that's just stupid and ridiculous. So I boycotted that movie. I never wanted to see it, and I still haven't seen it to this day. And I'm totally happy not having seen Return of the Living Dead. And I never saw Return of the Living Dead 2, even though some of the guys at Video Archive saw it at a market research screening. They said the only good part about it is at the end, there's like a zombie dressed up like Michael Jackson in the Thriller video.
Yes, there is.
That gets executed. They go, that's the best. That's the only good scene about it. But way after the fact, years and years and years, sometime in the late 90s or early 2000s, I watched the straight-to-video sequel of Return of the Living Dead Part 3, directed by Brian Usna. I think I'd read either between Video Watchdog or Psychotronic or something that it was like it was a pretty good movie. There was something special about it. So I watched Return of the Living Dead 3, not having seen the other ones, and I was completely taken by it. The lead girl in the film gives a terrific performance, and it's really charming and it's really clever, and I was really taken. But the thing about it that made it really special, you can tell. And the fact that Brian Usna is doing it, you can really tell.
Yeah.
But literally in the script, watching the movie, you can tell this was written to be a Reanimator sequel. Everything they do fits the Reanimator mythology. I mean, even down to the whole thing is they're going to give his dead girlfriend the reanimation juice. Okay, now they ended up coming up with something that would apply from Return of the Living Dead, but it's obviously was completely and utterly designed as a Reanimator sequel. If they did it as a Reanimator sequel, it would be the best of the Reanimator sequels, hands down.
Of the Reanimator sequels.
It's much better than Bride of Reanimator. But then they just changed it, all right? Let's not. We've done Reanimator too much. Let's do another. Change it to Return of the Living Dead. But there's an aspect about that I even like. The arbitrariness of changing the franchise, even when it's clearly a Reanimator film.
It's the Bad Lieutenant Port of Call New Orleans of Reanimator sequels. I remember the two of us specifically talking about how absolutely blown away we were by the truck crash. The log crash in Final Destination 2.
Oh, yeah.
That, for me, was one of the best surprises of a franchise I didn't love. I saw the first one. I thought it was fun. But Final Destination 2, for me, got me so into it. And I thought, oh, this is such a clever hook. The way they staged those deaths. That truck crash, the thing through the eye, man.
No, but and even their whole format, the whole mythology, the whole setup. Okay, now one by one, these guys are going to start dying in these weird Rube Goldberg
ways.
Orchestrated deaths. No, that was actually one because I actually saw Final Destination 2 first. And so when I went back and saw the first one, I liked it. But I go, oh, no, they didn't get the mythology right until part 2.
Well, it's funny because they sort of didn't get known by number, but did you see is that the one with the truck crash? Yeah, no, the plane crash is the first one. What's the bridge crash? That's part 5. You're just always waiting.
No, that's the one with the roller coaster.
Yes, that's the roller. Exactly.
That's the one with the roller coaster with all the Tom Cruise impersonators in it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I thought
there literally
really
is one guy in part 3 is totally doing, looks like he's starring in All the Right Moves, the musical on Broadway.
Oh.
And then another guy is starring in the Broadway musical version of A Few Good Men.
All the Tom Cruise Broadway guys.
All the Tom Cruise Broadway musical guys.
Summer of '86. I know we talked about Chainsaw, but summer of '86 also brought Aliens. I mean, that for me was a game changer, because I remember it was like the first one on steroids. I mean, that was my first, it had that action and adrenaline of the Terminator and the horror of the first one.
Well,
do you remember when you first saw Aliens?
Well, yeah, and I was there for the first night of that show. That was really exciting. But again, that just goes to what I was saying. They had an interesting character with an interesting mythology. So it wasn't just about, okay, let's come up with another 6 people that we can and put them on a spaceship and stick the alien in there. It's not, Terror Within Part 2. All right, so it's like, let's come up with 6 different people and come up with a different spaceship and put the alien on that and then watch them kill those 6 people off. It was the idea that the whole concept of the aliens as a race, and who exactly were they, and how did they work, and what were they doing, what was their planet, what's the deal. The idea of like one creating that much havoc was one thing, but to have a whole army of them, again, your concept is so good. There's room to grow with it. And they had a great lead character in Sigourney Weaver's Ripley. A human character to base it on. But the alien was a great character. We wanted to know more about the alien.
And seeing the Queen Mother laying the eggs, and you had Newt. I also remember when it was the first time the guys were using video game language in a sci-fi movie, when Bill Paxton's like, forget it, man, game over, Sarge is wasted. Like, someone using that kind of lingo, it felt so fresh and so modern in a sci-fi film. And that you could mix sci-fi and horror and action, blending all those so seamlessly. Gremlins 2, the new batch. Edgar loves Gremlins 2. I remember, it's like the first one on steroids. Are you a fan of Gremlins 2? Or what do we think? I remember when I saw the movie, I thought the projector broke. Yeah. And then Hulk Hogan came out and complained to Paul Bartel. But that's kind of an underrated film. But I loved Gremlins 2.
Oh, no, I think Gremlins 2 is Joe Dante's best movie. To the degree that, I think it's Joe Dante became a director so he could do Gremlins 2. He's always been a smart alecky kind of director, because he's a smart alecky kind of guy. There always is a little bit of a Mad Magazine parody of his own movie running in the margins of a Joe Dante film. And with Gremlins 2, he was able to do a Mad Magazine takeoff on the first Gremlins for the entire movie, for the length of the movie. And it held for the entire length of the movie. But when they actually start goofing on every aspect of Christopher Columbus's original premise in the movie, in the sequel, that was hysterical about, okay, don't eat after midnight. Okay, so what if the Mogwai eats a roast beef sandwich at 11:45 and he gets some roast beef stuck in his teeth? At 12:30, it gets unlodged. Does that count as eating? What if Mogwai is eating an Eggs Benedict breakfast on an international flight and it crosses over into another time zone? Does that count eating after midnight? Or does it only count eating after midnight from the airport he left from?
Well, once Phoebe Cates started parroting the Santa Claus story,
that's great. The Phoebe Cates parroting the Santa Claus.
I didn't
monologue.
know you were allowed to do that. I was like, are you allowed to make fun of your own movie? I remember seeing that going. They can't. You described it perfectly. That he was making the Mad Magazine parody version.
Well,
of Gremlins.
I think it's always been a little clear that Joe Dante has a little contempt for the first movie. It's just not his kind of movie. He wrestled it to the ground and made it his movie. But I don't even know if Joe Dante would see Gremlins if he didn't direct it. And he's just too much of a Weisenheimer, all right, to not hate himself for shooting all the Mogwai stuff at the beginning. I think it seriously bums him out that was his biggest hit. So the idea to have complete revenge on your one fluke hit was just too powerful. And as opposed to like the first Gremlins, which recedes from the memory into like all those Amblin movies, Gremlins 2 just gets better every time you see it. Gremlins 2 works. It's really, really funny. In fact, I would even go so far as to say it's the first of those gag-like movies to 100% work from beginning to end since Airplane. Like, I like Top Secret and everything, but it doesn't quite work as a movie, but it's got a lot of funny gags. And there's a lot of movies that have a lot of funny gags that, like, don't take themselves seriously as movies. Airplane, because of the situation of the storyline, had a through line that you were able to follow. And so you actually did care about whether or not the plane landed or not. And in the course of Gremlins and New Batch, while it's just one joke after another, and it's not even just the jokes the people are saying on screen, it's the jokes going on in the background, the voiceover jokes going on here, what's on TV, what's this gremlin over there doing? That's like one of the things, like in Airplane 2. Airplane 2, the stuff in the foreground is not that funny. The stuff in the background is hysterical. Every joke in the background or off screen is a killer. But in the case of Gremlins and New Batch, no, you actually do care how it comes out. So it is a Mad Magazine spoof with a dramatic arc.
It's true. It's a beautiful way to put it. I think if people saw it under that lens, they'd probably appreciate it more.
Well, I think everyone sees it that way now. Look, it was accepted that way. It just wasn't a big hit. Gremlins 2: The New Batch is the only time Joe Dante ever got a rave review in the New Yorker.
I didn't know that.
You got a rave.
I just remember that he said it cost $60 million and it didn't make its money back.
Well, no, it didn't do well, all right? But the people who saw it were like, what? Is this even coming out of Hollywood? This is amazing.
I got my money's worth. Once Hulk Hogan and Paul Bartel were in the scene together and the projector broke, it was one of the best things I'd ever seen. I actually stood up and yelled, the projector broke. I was the idiot that got fooled by that gag in the theater.
And then, like, you watch it on video. All right, then they redid the scene, so it's now the gremlin is in your video player.
Yeah, the videotape.
Yeah.
Holiday horror. I mean, it all goes back. I guess we can probably trace it back to Black Christmas. Bob Clark, the great Bob Clark. And then the rumor was that Halloween was going to be there, that he was going to do a Black Halloween. I love slasher movies, and there's just something about setting it around a holiday that just makes me happy. It hits a sweet spot in my soul. Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite of the holidays? I mean, I remember you went through the whole calendar. It was New Year's Evil, My Bloody Valentine.
Yeah.
I mean, you could put God Told Me To into the St. Patrick's Day parade.
Yeah, you could. Yeah.
April Fool's Day. I mean, Mother's Day. It's endless. What is it that tying into a holiday that makes it so fun?
Well, usually, they have a good title. The idea that you're going to take this holiday and then make it something of terror is inviting, and then you have all the accoutrement of
My Bloody Valentine.
Yes, exactly. Then you have all the
poster.
accoutrement of the holiday in question. When you finally do Thanksgiving, whether it'll be, pilgrims and Indians and shitty turkey decorations, plastered up on walls.
Of course.
Or it's all the shitty Valentine decorations that are plastered up all over Valentine's Bluff for My Bloody Valentine. And it's a good excuse to get a group of people together to celebrate. And there also tends to be more of a family situation in the holiday horror films.
My Bloody Valentine. I remember us getting very emotional about the end song, the Ballad of Harry Warden. The end theme song, a long time ago.
It's one of my favorite theme songs in any horror film ever. And the movie was such a classy production. I was really taken by how classy a production it was. And then to end with a well-written theme song that actually tells the story of the movie. I go, oh wow, they really went all out. This is a first grade A production. There's a few of these that I'm a fan of. Obviously, I'm a fan of Black Christmas. Obviously, I'm a big fan of My Bloody Valentine. To me, it's the best of the Canadian slasher films, partly because it commits to being a Canadian slasher film. It's not taking place in upstate New York, or it's not someplace in Minnesota or whatever. Mm-hmm. No, it's in a steel mining town somewhere in Canada where they have thick Canadian accent. And it's not about the suburb. It's a very working class town. It's like the town in The Deer Hunter as a serial killer going through it, killing them all off.
Yeah, it's not like well-to-do kids in a sorority house being.
No, it's like
people in a mining town.
No, any one of those guys could have been in Deer Hunter.
Yeah, it's true.
I really like Lori Haller in it, who's the girl in the film. She was really good. I'm a big fan of that film, and I'm a big fan of I like April Fool's Day.
I love Fred Walton, man. I mean, what a great film. April Fool's Day. I mean, for me, the ending was what kept it from being a classic horror film. But that first, even though I like the ending, but those first, the kills in that movie are really fantastic. The puzzles, the guy on the boat. It kept me guessing all the way. There's some really fantastic kills in that movie.
Yeah, but okay, there was that.
It's like 10 little Indians.
Yeah, but
there's
there was that feminist horror fanzine that you showed me.
We got them. We were interviewing them for the show.
Yeah, well, they had that interview. She wrote that review about April Fool's Day, and she was like talking about what a good film it is and how it's unfair simply because of the reveal ends up being non-horror. Mm-hmm. That it's unfair.
Does that negate the whole movie? Yeah.
That it negates the whole film. Now I really like the ending. I think it's now I know what to expect. I really like the ending. And that almost goes back to Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. Everyone gets pissed off when it turns out that it's like the ambulance driver as opposed to Jason doing the murders. Mm-hmm. But until that reveal happens, those are actually some of the best kills in any Friday the 13th movie. That Friday the 13th movie works like a good Friday the 13th film.
Well, that's
until you realize it's the ambulance guy and you go, oh, screw this movie.
Well, that's your question. I loved your boat theory that a horror movie has to be like a boat that's coming in from port, and if it doesn't, if there's one little rock, if there's one hole in it, the whole thing sinks.
Yeah.
That it's got to have logic.
But I think, but in the case of,
but is that about it breaking its own rules?
Yeah, but in the case of April Fool's Day, I think that's our failing because no, it's April Fool's. It didn't happen. That's the point
a joke.
Of it's the point of the holiday. It's the point of it all. April Fool's. It's clearly marked on the label. It's our misunderstanding of it. They did a perfect job.
Yeah, you're right. I never even thought of it that way. That's really funny.
And also, I'm a huge Deborah Foreman fan. So anything where she has one of the big roles, whether it be Valley Girl or My Chauffeur or April Fool's Day, I'm totally down. In fact, I just got through watching Grizzly 2, and she's in Grizzly 2, and like, oh my God, Deborah Foreman's in it, great. But if I was going to talk about one holiday horror film, I think the only one that really, except for like what we talked about April Fool's Day that we just referred to, the only one that truly bears a discussion is Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that one up. I mean, it's amazing.
That movie's amazing.
It's an amazing, the sledding scene, that movie, yeah. I don't know if I've ever cheered louder in a movie than the decapitation and the sledding.
People who don't understand the concept of slasher movies and people who don't understand the concept of that style of 70s, 80s horror, to them, it's all violent porno as far as they're concerned, because they just don't get it. And most of the films that they made a big deal about, I wish they were closer to what they think they were. I wish they were that strong. I wish they were that rough. They're making a mountain out of a molehill. Silent Night, Deadly Night is fucked up for a horror film fan.
Yeah.
If you've seen all the slashers, you're a little taken aback by Silent Night, Deadly Night. And not because it's shot so cruddy or it looks like a 70s roughie or anything. It's not like Nightmare, all right? It's it's not that like the filmmaking itself looks sleazy. It's what they're shooting is sleazy. And there's something really uncomfortable about that movie. And it's very violent. I really like the lead kid in it. I like them both. I like him as a young man. I like him as a little boy. And I like him as an adult. But one of the things that works really well in that movie is, and this is where it breaks form with the other slasher films. The other slasher film, what makes them slasher films is their genre is so rigid. They all kind of follow the same playbook to one degree or another. It's almost part of the fun of them. And one of the playbooks that they've always followed is there might be an inciting incident that turns the killer into the killer, like in Terror Train or something like that.
Rosemary's Killer.
Rosemary's
The
Killer.
Prowler. Yeah.
And The Prowler. There might be an incident that makes that happen. But you don't see their lives for 20 minutes or so. You know,
it starts with prom night with a bunch of kids, and then they're adults. So
how they became who they became. Rob Zombie did that when he did his Halloween. He was like, no, let's see Michael Myers when he was younger. Let's build Michael Myers before he puts on the mask. And that's one of the things I really like about that movie. Silent Night, Deadly Night spends 20 minutes with this little boy to show you his horrible life that he has, that made him the way he is. And frankly, that's as harrowing a story of a little boy trying to make his way in the world with those horrible nuns and everything that happens to him as I've ever seen in any movie. Fuck Peugeot, all right? It's the opening 20 minutes of Silent Night, Deadly Night. And the weird part about it is, as fucked up as that kid's life is, I watch that movie and I go, that's a little too close to how I was raised.
Wow.
People were that mean to me when I was a kid. Adults were actually that mean. I'm not saying everybody was, but I saw myself in that kid. I go, that is too close to my childhood. Nothing that bad happened, but that's definitely too close to my childhood.
Too close. Well, I remember Silent Night, Deadly Night, and Sleepaway Camp were the two slasher films that caught me by surprise because they were just so unrelenting and so brutal and took no prisoners and made no apologies, and were both exceptionally well done. It's interesting you compared it to Nightmare, where you think of, Romano Scavellino, Nightmare on a Damaged Brain, which is about the sleaze and the perversity in the Times Square.
That's meant to look like it was shot on 42nd Street and only shown on 42nd Street.
Yes, if you feel dirty watching it, you feel like you need a shower. But when you watch Silent Night, Deadly Night, at the time, the idea of putting on a Santa Claus suit and going out and killing, no one had actually taken horror to that level. No one had ever thought to do that. And that was, people were so, I remember religious groups were protesting.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And this is at the end of the slasher boom when you had to outdo everything that was before it.
But the thing is, the entire section when he's trapped in the toy store.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about fucking around with your perspective of things that you know in this weird, violent milieu is when you have the killer in the Santa Claus outfit, but he's in a toy store. So every scene you watch behind him is Muppet toys. There's Kermit, there's Miss Piggy. He turns down another aisle and it is like Bugs Bunny and Snoopy, and he turns down another aisle and it's Mickey Mouse and Goofy and Donald Duck. I mean, it's every character you've ever known that has, those characters witness the entire night of murder. They are in every shot at a certain point in the last 20 minutes of the movie. I mean, it just starts being funny how you're like having a staring contest with Kermit.
Yeah, like Daffy Duck is suddenly in a slasher movie. Yeah, it's true, all your childhood toys.
He's killing her. They're like, you see a Snoopy right there.
But it's also that children would run up to him and be so trusting and go, Santa, Santa, Santa. And he's just going to kill them. And
you would never be able to get away with using all those characters in the background anymore. They could do that then. I'm a big fan of that.
I know, it's true. Yeah, you'd have to clear all of it now.
Yeah.
I remember a movie that I absolutely love that sort of has nothing to do with the holiday, but they almost tricked me by the holiday, is Mother's Day.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Mother's Day is one of my all-time favorite movies. But it's also this really weird satire on consumerism.
Oh, absolutely.
And all of those fake commercials that they put in the movie. I remember thinking, I think this movie actually might be some kind of weird, brilliant art film in a crazy way. Yeah, and yet it's also one of the most perverse and violent films ever made.
What was your whole thing that you had about Boogie Nights and Mother's Day?
I watched Boogie Nights, and I thought that the entire pool party sequence at Burt Reynolds' house, when Dirk Diggler, when he gets the name Dirk Diggler, when he shows up at the house and you're following a girl on roller skates and it's Roller Girl, I was like, this is like the party scene that's at the house when it's Abby and then there's Trina and they go and it cuts to, it says Beverly Hills, but it was actually shot at Lloyd Kaufman's parents' house in Connecticut, and you're following a girl on roller skate and the guy's like, you got to have gross points, not net points. The girl's like, did you say gross point? I'm from Gross Point. And then the guy doing the coke, who is the prop master, Sandy Hamilton, does the coke, like doing the line of coke and passing out. And the people just like, you know, talking about taking the 405 to Sepulveda. Nah, man. And there's just roller skating. Then she gets the phone call to have the reunion with her friends. And it's weird. Like Mother's Day is one of those movies. Every time I rewatch it, I realize that I'm just stealing something else from it.
Yeah.
But it also has this incredible performance from Beatrice Pons, who was credited as Rose Ross. And then they have, you know, I remember it said Holden McGuire and Billy Ray McQuaid. Those guys all everybody took fake names.
Yeah.
Michael McCleary, Beatrice Pons.
They're fantastic. They're you know, to me, the Sons are two of the best performances of that entire era of the genre.
Well, the guy Gary, I feel like his name is not Gary Lockwood, like Gary, who played. He's wrongly credited on IMDb, but the guy who played Ike was actually on Edge of Night, the soap opera, which Niles McMaster from Bloodsucking Freaks was on. But when I didn't understand their names, Ike and Adley, until my dad explained that that's Eisenhower and Adlai Stevenson.
Oh,
I was like, they were named like Ike and Adley? Like, why? Why were they named those political names? And that got me thinking, when you look at the whole thing with the est, the kind of EST, the est parody at the beginning with like, I love you, and then the decapitation. And she says, I just take what I want and you can leave the sewer, leave everything else in the city. But I remember the thing about Mother's Day is, in terms of using camera to establish character, you have one of them in the opening scene, the man just grabs her and smothers her, and you realize she's dominated by this boyfriend, and she's the one who's always dominated by men, and the men are dominant in the frame, and she's tiny. And then when you have Chyna, the one who's the wild party girl, the camera's moving, like really moving crazy, because that's her lifestyle. She has this kind of crazy lifestyle. And the other one is like rigidly and controlled by her mother. And the mother's screaming, I'm a sick woman, which is used at the end of the movie. And then it's like they actually use the camera to represent the characters. And then at the end, when the mother gets suffocated by the breast, I remember thinking I really wanted, first, the axe and the balls was the greatest thing I've ever seen. But I wanted something more from the mother's death. I thought, well, maybe she's 80. How can they do it? And then I thought, oh my God, it's perfect. Mother's been suffocated by the breast. It's really what made me see what you could do with a slasher film. Because up till that point, they were for me as a kid, they were by the numbers of like, how can you kill them? But I started watching Mother's Day over and over and over and thinking, oh my God, you can actually say a lot with a slasher movie.
It took it more in the Last House on the Left kind of way. And it kind of delivered that kind of sleazy terror that Last House on the Left has. But there is this subtextual comedy and critique of consumerism. There was always something more going on in Mother's Day than what was in the foreground.
Now, we can't talk about holiday horror without talking about Jamie Lee Curtis, starring in Terror Train, which is a New Year's Eve one, Prom Night, which is not really a holiday, but it's an event. And of course, Halloween and Road Games. I
didn't care for Terror Train when it came out, and I didn't like Prom Night when it came out. I'm like, oh, this is a horrible Carrie ripoff. 11 years ago, I started watching all the slasher films all over again. And then I went to watch Prom Night again. And I was surprised how much I liked it, watching it like the second time. All the kills are horrible. The kills are awful. All right, but everything except for the kills, I think actually was very entertaining. They did a really good job with it. Just the kills don't work. I loved her in Halloween, and like I said, I think she's amazing in Road Games.
Yeah. Road Games is one of her best roles.
I remember reading a review for Terror Train that goes, this movie could do for medical students what Serpico did for cops. Just all of a sudden, you just don't trust them at all.
Mad Scientists. Are you a fan of the old Universal, the old James Whale, Frankenstein, Invisible Man, Mad Scientist movies?
Yeah, I'm a fan of any of those movies that, for the most part, creates a situation for one of those cool old character actors, whether it be Boris Karloff or Bela Lugosi or Lionel Atwell, to play characters like that.
As kids, you know, the famous monsters, like those are the ones that were shown on television. Those are the movies that I saw first.
Well, it's funny. Okay, it's definitely a genre. It's not one that I had this like tremendous affection for, especially when I was a kid, that I sought out. However, where I started taking
Island of Dr. Moreau or any of those films, Island of Lost Souls.
Yeah. Well, look, obviously, Island of Lost Souls is a terrific film, but the thing is, though, those weren't the ones that I necessarily sought out. However, I kind of saw this really late in the game. I actually didn't see this until about like 6 or 7 years ago. I'd never seen the Hammer Frankenstein movies. And so I started watching the Hammer Frankenstein films. And that was where the mad scientist really kind of came into his own. Because the whole concept of Peter Cushing as Dr. Frankenstein and the whole concept of those films is it's the doctor that's the monster. The monster is actually this pathetic creature that you actually feel sorry for. One of the most heartbreaking moments in any horror film, I know heartbreaking is not the right word, but like one of these moments where people go, oh, in the history of horror is when the woman gets scared and grabs the scalpel and stabs the monster in Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. Because you're like, oh no, he didn't do anything. He's poor little bald, pathetic creature. The point is that it's Dr. Frankenstein that's the monster. He's the star of the movie, and he's not just struggling with, no, he's become a monster in his struggle for science. The dark side had him before the movie starts. And he doesn't give a damn about anything. And the first two are direct sequels. Revenge is a direct sequel to it, because I think in Curse they're taking him to the gallows and then he gets a reprieve. And then after Revenge, I'm trying to remember how it goes. I think he becomes the monster. He puts his brain in the monster, or he puts the brain of the other doctor in the monster. And so you have to do a little bit of gymnastic work to make the other ones fit. But if everything is always just jumping off from the last one, they don't go out of their way to make it a direct sequel. But I think it is, because it makes it more interesting.
I love, the Dracula ones, the Hammer horror Dracula. I remember.
Yeah, but that's different though. That's vampire. But we're talking about, frankly, it's because of the Dracula ones. I always stayed away from the Frankenstein ones. Because it was like, the Frankenstein makeup for Christopher Lee didn't really turn me on that much. It just didn't seem interesting to me. And then when I saw it, I go, wow, I like this much more than the Dracula movies. I think they're really, really good. And even the whole idea, and Terence Fisher did this with the horror of Dracula, the idea that he was actually able, 3 different times between The Mummy and Dracula and then Frankenstein, take these classic novels with tons of characters and tons of locations and really squash them down, tell the same story, but tell it in pretty much one castle with about like 5 or 6 people. But it still tells the story of the novel. That's actually kind of a feat, to take these wild, wieldy period novels with all these different characters, and people go to different countries and they end up in the Arctic, all right? And Frankenstein, no, he just boils it down to the castle and about 6 people. But he does an effective version of telling the story. You're talking about great mad doctors, all right? Then you're talking about Dr. Pretorius in both Bride of Frankenstein and in the Christopher Esherwood Frankenstein: The True Story, James Mason's character. Oh,
yeah. Well, Bride of Frankenstein is one we haven't discussed. I mean, the Elsa Lancaster hair, it's still iconic to this day.
Yeah.
That was one where I remember as a kid, you think, where are they going to take the story? And the Bride of becomes a thing because of that movie.
The Bride of Frankenstein, that's one of the great sequels of all time. It's one of the great movies of all time.
It actually transcends being a sequel.
Yeah, it does.
There's certain movies that escape the number 2 and just become their own thing, and that's one of them.
Well, I think that's one of the ones where it's better than the first movie. So if I have to choose between watching Frankenstein or The Bride of Frankenstein, I'll always choose Bride of Frankenstein. And that actually literally does what Richard Franklin was talking about. Because you remember the scene with the old blind man, and people will think that that's in Frankenstein. No, that's in Bride of Frankenstein. In the Mad Doctor category, one of the films that I would like to throw in the hat and mention is the Eddie Romero Blood Island trilogy.
Oh, I don't know those.
which is Brides of Blood, Mad Doctor of Blood Island, and Brain of Blood. So it was actually really interesting because Eddie Romero doing his movies in the Philippines, he's a Filipino director, making his war films and his action films and his women in prison movies and his horror films. It's funny about different nationalities, how they respond to this or that and the other. In Europe, we've been definitely affected a lot by Dracula and Frankenstein and tell that story over and over and over and over and over again. Something about the Philippines, and maybe it's just Eddie Romero, or maybe it's the Philippines, or maybe it's both of them, they give the kind of respect that we give Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley's Frankenstein story to Island of Dr. Moreau. Because Eddie Romero did basically 5 movies that are basically the story of the Island of Dr. Moreau. The first film, Terror is a Man, is a very low-rent version of the Island of Dr. Moreau story. The whole Blood Island trilogy is reminiscent of the Island of Dr. Moreau story. And then his movie Twilight People is just the Island of Dr. It's just Eddie Romero's The Island of Dr. Moreau. They just called it the Twilight People. You know, but it basically is. They just did the Island of Dr. Moreau, where Pam Grier playing the Panther Girl. It's great.
What do you think is the best of the Dr. Moreaus? Lost Souls or the, you know,
Lost. Yeah, you can't beat
Val
Lost
Kilmer?
Souls. You can't. I never saw the Marlon Brando one, but you can't beat Island of Lost Souls. Is just one of the creepiest movies ever made. But the Blood Island series is really fun. It's really good, and especially the middle one, the Mad Doctor of Blood Island. They all star John Ashley. The first one and the second one, they're kind of unrelated sequels where like John Ashley is basically playing the same character, but he's not the same character. But the third one is a direct sequel to the second one.
Sort of like Garrett Graham in Hi, Mom, and Greetings.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
he's in both, but he's a different character. Yeah.
Mad Doctor of Blood Island, one of the things that was actually fun about it is they used to show it here on Channel 13 on the weekends. We had a horror host in Los Angeles played by a guy named Alan Sherman, and his name was Famous Morris. And he was a talent agent for the Monsters. That was his job. He was an agent. He was a talent agent for the Monsters. So he had a talent agency.
Alan Sherman, Hello Mudda, Hello Fodder?
No, different Alan Sherman. Okay. Actually, this Alan Sherman is actually in Rocky. He's the guy that, he's the bartender. Hey, you want me to take a shot? There you go. Hey, I took a shot. Okay, that's Famous Morris. All right.
So he was a horror host, and
he was a horror host, and his whole thing was he was an agent for the Monsters. So like the Wolfman and the Mummy are always hanging around his office. As a hunchback, as an intern, or as whatever. But Channel 13 showed they had a really sleazy package of movies. And one of the things about their package is they had a whole package of Hemisphere films. And so it was really unique. When they showed Mad Doctor of Blood Island, there's actually nudity in it. And they didn't clip it out. And I thought maybe it was just in Los Angeles, but when I started reading more about the movies, I realized that this was kind of known everywhere. And so it was definitely, I mean, it wasn't like full on, it's like fleeting nudity, but nevertheless, it starts with a naked native girl running away from the monster, and you see that she's naked. You see her little fanny. And so they showed it Saturday night at 11:30. So I called up a bunch of my friends. I mean, we're like in 5th grade. Guys, there's a movie that they're showing on Channel 13 that like actually has nudity in it. And there's a few different scenes of naked girls running around. Really? Yeah, I'm telling you, it's on Channel 13. They're showing it again on Sunday. They're showing it again in the afternoon on Sunday. So watch it. And so I actually got together a couple of friends and we watched it. And I was expecting them maybe to cut out the nudity by the time they showed it on Sunday because they got all these calls. They didn't. So now it's Sunday afternoon and there's nudity on your TV. It was like, oh, wow.
It was exciting.
Christmas in July.
An apocalyptic horror. Nightmare City, Umberto Lenzi. Nightmare City is one of my favorite movies because the infected run, I remember that was like a zombie movie, but they run through aerobics classes.
No, I remember it from its Continental Home Video days under the title City of the Walking Dead.
Which is funny because City of the Walking Dead, it's actually a running movie. They should have called it City of the Running Dead. That's why I avoided it for so long. And not to be confused with City of the Living Dead.
I remember actually when they just come running off the boat.
At the airport. Yeah, when the plane comes down, the plane comes down and they just run right out at the airport. and Stiglitz just stands there, just looking around. It's one of the great openings.
No, it's a great opening. I ended up showing it to the bunch of the guys at Video Archives, and they were like, "Wow, we've never seen an opening like this." And I remember one of the guys said, "Boy, running away from a zombie that can run faster than you, that's fucked up."
Yeah. They don't get tired.
I remember when Bob Murawski was going to do something with Umberto Lenzi, I go to Bob and go, "Hey, so tell Umberto how much I love his zombie movie, City of the Walking Dead." And so when Bob Murawski gets to Italy, he tells Umberto Lenzi, "Oh, well, Quentin Tarantino is a big fan of yours, and he wanted me to let you know how much he enjoyed your zombie movie, City of the Walking Dead." "Zombie? What do you mean zombie? They're not zombies. It's infected the people. They're not zombies. It's a zombie." He doesn't even understand my movie.
He got very offended by the Z word.
That became a big thing, all right? Whenever talking about the genres, there are zombie movies, and then there's infected people movies.
Well, you can tell that they're infected and that they're Italians because they generally rip the women's shirts open before they bite them. Like there's like 4 scenes of them, like the nurses, and they're like, it's not like they just go for the brains and bite the neck like they do in Dawn of the Dead or Zombies. They just see it and they go, and then bite. Totally underrated movie that I love. One of my favorite in the kind of the PG early mid 80s PG-13 movies, which was very exciting at the time, is Night of the Comet. Are you a Night of the Comet fan?
Yeah, Night of the Comet was okay. I ended up seeing it at the Cinerama Dome when it came out. It was okay.
I think that Night of the Comet I liked that.
That's the one with the guy from Eating Raoul in it, right?
Yeah.
Robert Beltran.
Yes. Yeah. And what's her? Mary Warrenov is in it.
Catherine, what that name? The girl that had a name like 5 other girls, Catherine Mary Margaret Stewart.
Yes. But in Night of the Comet, there is one great scene where it kind of had punks, it had Uzis. The girls' fathers had been in the military, so they were kind of badasses on machine guns. And they sort of pull off the LA apocalypse at 5 a.m. when they have to completely clear the streets. And they like shot it at 4:50 or just as the sun was coming up when there's no cars and they kind of get the shots. But there's a great scene where they go into the mall and it's like, I remember as a kid, it was like, oh, wow, you could have the whole mall to yourself. And there's a great shot where the girls put down the Uzi and then she picks up a pair of shoes. And then they're kind of do their whole shopping thing and she goes to put them back and the Uzi's gone. And you realize someone else is with them.
Yeah.
And then they hear, "Attention, shoppers, we have a special today." And like the infected are trying to get their blood, and they've like the guys have gone crazy, and they're on the PA system.
Actually, I don't remember that. That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, no, it really holds up. The two girls are really Kelly Maroney is one of them.
I've always been a big fan of Kelly Maroney. I think she does and she was especially good in that movie. I mean, look, the classic of that genre, I think the Big Mamu, the one that they're all judged by, is probably the Andromeda Strain.
Oh yeah, yes.
That's the prestige one. That's the one that if you're not talking about just some weird zombie breakout happening, if you're talking about a genuine disease that it could happen and you're trying to clamp it down, that's the one that they all get judged by, I think.
No, I agree. I mean, Robert Wise's film, that's the one. You get this I Am Legend, the Omega Man, but the one that if you haven't seen it, that's the well that everyone's drinking from.
Yeah, Omega Man, I don't think that stuff counts. It all happened after the fact. When a disease killed everybody, now you're the only guy left. That's not a disease movie. That's, apocalypse. Yeah, that's an apocalypse movie.
No, we have Andromeda Strain to talk about. I love Andromeda. What do you think? What is it about? It's such a simple movie and it's so well done, and it just the pace of that movie just moves and moves. I mean, Robert Wise does that and The Haunting, and I mean his filmography is incredible. It's
a combination of Robert Wise's clear-eyed direction and Michael Crichton's clever script, novel and script. Wise ends up being a really good director for Michael Crichton. And everything in it is plausible. Everything in it sounds possible. Like you were saying, there's other movies that could be disease movies, but they ultimately become apocalypse movies. I mean, like a movie that I'm a big fan of, I'm a big fan of, is the TV movie Where Have All the People Gone with Peter Graves.
Oh, yeah.
And that's terrific.
Yeah.
But that ultimately ends up being an apocalypse movie. It's like an event happened that caused everybody to disintegrate.
Damnation Alley. Yeah, Damnation Alley.
Yeah, it's an event that happened that caused everything to go away. But the fact that the disease is a disease, and they've got to maintain it, and they've got to control it, and the consequences of if it gets out, and what would the spread rate be? All of that stuff is taken very, very seriously in the Andromeda Strain. It's a terrific movie. Yeah, I think it's when you're talking about those type of films, it's the one to beat. It was even kind of funny because they at Scott Free they did a modern miniseries remake of the Andromeda Strain, and so they did like a 2-night thing. They redid the novel, whatever. But nothing wrong with these actors, but they're casting Benjamin Bratt and all these like sexy girls and guys to play all the characters. Now, Robert Wise, it's like David Wayne, it's Arthur Hill, James Olsen. There was all these like middle-aged, regular-looking people that like actually look like they have the degrees that they're supposed to have.
No, it's true. He cast people that really look like those scientists and the epidemiologists, not just
it's not like all of a sudden,
like really
so there's all these
people.
scientists and Raquel Welch. No, that's not the case.
Right, yeah, no. I also love the 1980 Italian apocalypse, Lucio Fulci version of the apocalypse, City of the Living Dead, with Giovanni Lombardi Radice getting the drill press pushed through his skull and a maggot storm. Lucio Fulci just taking the apocalypse idea and just like going next level, like vomiting guts and like priest's eyes bleeding and like Michele Soavi and the guts coming out of the mouth. It's amazing.
Of his gore movies, that's hands down my favorite of his gore movies. I really like Zombie. Zombie, I think, works more from its mythology kind of standpoint. Like you can imagine other zombie movies, and that's why I like the idea of a zombie comic book was a really neat idea. But as far as like an entertaining movie from beginning to end, City of the Walking Dead is the Gates of Hell. What I always think of it as Gates of Hell. That's what it was released in America as.
I know, yeah, Gates of Hell. It's, again, changing the title 15 different ways. But that movie sort of opening the gates of hell, kind of sort of a precursor to the Beyond. But that movie, that opening scene in the car in the cemetery with the girl's eyes bleeding and Michele Soavi vomiting out the guts is just, it's unforgettable apocalyptic imagery.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I love the Hitchcockian bit of the girl buried alive in the coffin and Christopher George trying to dig her out and the pickaxe, going through the coffin.
Yeah.
That's a great sequence.
It's an amazing sequence. Well, by the way, so Fulci with Two Buried Alive, I mean, he does that just after The Psychic. I mean, Seven Notes in Black. We're going to talk about psychics on the show. I mean, Fulci does two. I mean, is The Psychic your favorite Fulci of those?
Oh, easily. There was two kind of Lucio Fulcis. There was like the guy who did the gore films, and then the guy who did more classy movies. And the people who like the gore films don't give a damn about the classy films, and the people who like the classy films probably don't like the gore films. All right, I like them both, but to me, The Psychic, aka Seven Notes to the Tune of Black.
Sette Notti in Nero.
I just like even like saying that title. Sette Notti in Nero. It's one of my favorite giallos. It's one of my favorite Italian horror films of the 70s. It's actually one of my favorite thrillers. It's one of my favorite thrillers of the 70s. I kind of love everything about that movie. There's
and you brilliantly use that music in Kill
Yeah.
Bill. Like most people don't know that dun 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 dun.
No,
I mean,
the
they don't
soundtrack
know
is
that
terrific.
came
Jennifer
from that
O'Neill
movie.
gives one of her best performances, and I'm a big Jennifer O'Neill fan. She's fantastic in it. The costumes in the film are fantastic. The storytelling is really great. It has a real handsome look. I mean, if you just watch The New York Ripper and think that that's what Lucio Fulci is, and you watch The Psychic, you cannot believe the same guy directed both movies.
4 years apart. It's unbelievable. But it's interesting. The thing about Fulci, and there's a documentary that his daughter Antonella told me about called Fulci Talks that's talking about him, where it's a bunch of interviews of Fulci that someone made into a documentary. He was the guy who could put the star and the genre first. Argento put himself first. And a lot of these other, Leone put themselves first. But Fulci was able to adapt, whether it's the Maniacs doing his comedy, when he does La Pretora with Edwige Fenech, he's doing an Edwige Fenech sex comedy vehicle. When he does How I Robbed the Bank of Italy. He's doing the comedic Italian crime movie. And when he does the Giallo, well, first he does with Beatrice Cenci.
Yeah.
Beatrice Cenci, it's this amazing, powerful drama, but very critical of the Catholic Church, and the critics went against him. And then he does Don't Torture a Duckling, which is
I love Don't Torture a Duckling.
But masterpiece. Barbara Boucher and Mark Porrell, but very critical of the Catholic Church.
You think?
You think, yeah. And so the critics are against him, but he basically sort of surrenders his identity to the movie. So he's almost, and then he does, Silver Saddle with Giuliano Gemma and Four of the Apocalypse. He does these fantastic spaghetti westerns. He does comedy, he does spaghetti western, he does Giallo. Then he's 50, and then Fabrizio D'Angelis is like, here, just do this horror movie. And then he comes out with that amazing run of Zombie City, Zombie Gates of Hell, The Beyond, New York
House by the
Ripper,
Cemetery.
And sort of ends at Manhattan Baby or House by the Cemetery. But he's sort of known for that, and then he almost becomes a parody of himself. By the end of his life, he's making Cat in the Brain, where he's just like, it's like Fulci's 8.5 about, it's such an interesting director that he's sort of never appreciated. The thing that makes him a great director is that he can adapt to any genre, but it's also the thing that sort of makes him not known as a director because no one can distinguish his films except the gore movie.
Yeah, but then cut to after his death, then you go to every Fangoria convention for the next 20 years, and kids are walking around with Fulci Lives T-shirts.
I know, and he never lived to see it. I think he got to see it once, like in '97. He went to his first Fangoria convention. He got to be appreciated, and then he died. But yeah, no.
Well, it would be a nice Fulci touch for him to be able to see for him to live long enough to see a Fulci Lives T-shirt.
I know. Well, his daughter does.
His daughter's Antoniona saw it.
I know, his daughter does.
I mean, what a cool.
Speaking of
actually, what a cool honor for a director. All right, for your fans to you pass on, and your fans like wear T-shirts that say Fulci lived.
He's it. I mean, on Hostel 2, we were channeling the spirit of Lucio Fulci. But anytime I do a gore scene, we say, "Please, Lucio, with us." And you told me you did the same thing on Kill Bill.
Yeah, I did the same thing with Shang-Chi. All right.
Shang-Chi, channeling the masters. Yeah. But psychics, I know you love The Psychic, but there's a couple other psychic movies. The Fury, De Palma comes off of Carrie, and he goes right into The Fury. It's almost inexplicable. It's like he sort of makes the same film over. Why do you think he does that? Are you a fan of The Fury? And then, of course, Cronenberg picks it up with Scanners.
I used to be a big fan of The Fury. Now I think it's kind of cheesy, and I don't never need to see it again. All right, but I still kind of appreciate it as a De Palma fan. Part of the situation about why he did The Fury was kind of twofold. He wanted to do a bigger budget movie. He felt he'd always been kind of stuck doing these low budget things. He wanted to do something with a bigger canvas and a bigger budget, and he could hire more famous actors in it. And so after Carrie, he gets offered this script, and it's pretty similar to what he just did, but it offers him that bigger plate, that offers him that bigger movie, that bigger canvas. And he's got a big-time producer, Frankie Blondes, producing it. But the other thing about, and I think he was wrong, I think De Palma was wrong about this, De Palma's big hit that got him The Fury was Carrie. But he was really, really on about the idea that if Carrie had had a famous actor in it, a big famous movie star in it, it would have done even better. I think when The Omen actually ended up outbeating him at the box office, he really resented that. And he said, the reason The Omen did better is because they had Gregory Peck. I'm not saying Gregory Peck should have been in Carrie, but if we could have had a Gregory Peck in Carrie, it would have beaten The Omen. And he was just positive it was because he didn't have a big famous movie star. And so The Fury gave him a bigger canvas, and it gave him to hire all these famous people as in the supporting cast, but it also allowed him to have Kirk Douglas. Okay, now I have my Gregory Peck. Now I have my movie star who can lead this.
What does it say about him blowing up John Cassavetes at the end?
Yeah. Well, that's the Cassavetes blow-up scene is the best scene in the film.
Well, what about the psychics blowing things up? I mean, Scanners is just the single greatest. One of that and Maniac might be my two famous, or Dawn of the Dead, my famous favorite head explosions in movies. Scanners.
Well, Scanners does it great, but De Palma had already done it in The Fury, so yeah, it's great. I mean, well, Scanners is just like The Fury Part 2. Back when I liked The Fury more, I was always resenting the fact that it kept trying to be a horror film because I thought it wasn't that successful as a horror film. But as this new age James Bond secret agent kind of thing, that was what was really good about it. That was really interesting. And whenever it dealt in that aspect of it, it was like fresh and it was exciting. And the whole idea that like they're working for these agents and they're both secret agents, John Cassavetes and Kirk Douglas are secret agents. That was really, really neat. Well, Scanners does the same thing too. The best part of Scanners is that whole opening 20 minutes. Where all the agents are out there trying to kill each other.
I mean, for me, Scanners, those effects, when I was a kid and I saw it, I'd never seen the way the veins went up Michael Ironside's face.
That's fantastic. But I mean, you had seen The Fury by the time you saw Scanners, though, right?
I think I was too young. I saw The Fury after. That's why.
Okay. So,
but yeah, it was the Cronenberg body horror stuff. Yeah, so I saw them out of order.
Okay, so you saw them out. Yeah, okay. So if you've seen The Fury, when you see Scanners, it's like, well, it's good. It's not John Cassavetes being blown up from head to toe in slow motion good.
It's more like The Fury.
1981, you didn't forget The Fury from 78. Today, yeah.
I think they're more familiar with Scanners.
Oh, I think they are. Well, Scanners is ultimately, I think, the better film. If it wasn't for Stephen Lack.
Stephen is lacking. I just want to remake the movie without Stephen Lack.
But the weird part about Stephen Lack, though, is the movie that got Stephen Lack, Scanners, should be watched. It's a really interesting Canadian film by Alan Moyle, the guy who did Times Square, and it's called The Rubber Gun. And it's sort of like a drugstore cowboy, Dusty and Sweets McGee, Panic in Needle Park kind of film. And he's the leader of the kind of junkie types in the film. And he's fantastic. And it actually looks like a completely improv performance. The entire they set up situations, but they're improvising
he's
it.
So stiff
and he's amazing in it. You can see why he got cast after The Rubber Gun because he's terrific in The Rubber Gun, and The Rubber Gun's a really good movie. And then you see him in Scanners, and you're like, "What the fuck is this guy?" Now you go out and watch The Rubber Gun, you will not believe that one of the worst lead performances of all time was given by this guy. He's terrific.
Rabid.
Yeah, when it comes to infected people movie, probably my very favorite is David Cronenberg's Rabid. I love Rabid. That was like the first film of David Cronenberg's I ever saw. I didn't know who he was. I barely knew who Marilyn Chambers was. I remember I saw it, The Rolling Hills Twin. I remember watching it and this is pretty good, and going along with it. And wow, this is getting a little rougher than I was expecting. But when the operation scene happens and the doctor takes the nurse's finger and cuts it off with the scissors, I'm like, oh my God, what am I watching? And then it just gets crazier and crazier. And that was actually, I think, the first time where I really noticed people being infected in a big way. Okay, now this person's got it. Now that person's got it. Now that person's got it. Now this person's got it. And then ending it in with the people in the hazmat suits just picking up the bodies and throwing them in, including our heroine, throwing him in the garbage truck. The whole thing just blew me away. I thought it was fantastic. So when I went and saw The Brood, I saw The Brood because I recognized the name David Cronenberg. Oh, hey, that's the guy from Rabid. Because it was when The Brood came out, they still weren't writing about him in Famous Monsters. They still weren't writing about him in Fangoria yet. I recognized his name from Rabid.
Yeah, the first two movies I saw of his were Rabid and The Brood. I remember the poster of Scanners, but I remember the video box, the Warner video box of Rabid.
Yeah.
And I knew that it was Marilyn Chambers, and even being aware that it was some kind of metaphor for sexually transmitted diseases, and then going back and then watching Shivers, and They Came From Within, and then, of course, Videodrome. And David, I mean, he was probably the biggest, with those other guys. I tried to mix slashers and body horror, but the idea of losing control of your body was so terrifying to me and always traumatized me that I think I thought that when dogs were rabid, they were going to get something coming out of your armpit. I actually thought that that's what being rabid was because of that movie.
Yeah, the whole idea of the rabid disease that turns you into a homicidal maniac, and the fact that it's, once you get bit, now you have it, and like leading to such a horrible situation that martial law has broken out by the end, and Toronto is in flames with everyone going crazy. It's a terrific movie, and what he was able to do with his budget, it doesn't show. And I really like Marilyn Chambers in it. I like that actor Frank Moore, the guy who looks like John Savage. That's her boyfriend in the film. He's one of the Canadian actors that Cronenberg worked with that I really liked a lot. I've seen him in a few other Canadian movies. I like that guy, Frank Moore, the John Savage looking guy.
Yeah, well, I remember seeing, one of the great things about, if you look like the end of They Came From Within, where they're all in that swimming pool writhing around and the whole apartment building's infected, it sort of let me know, you don't have to resolve it.
Yeah.
You can have a horror movie end where just everyone dies and it just gets worse and worse and worse and
Yeah,
worse.
right.
Until pretty much everybody has it and then it ends.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a possibility. But then he does it two movies in a row. It's like the ending of Videodrome with Long Live the New Flesh, where you're just like, what the hell did I just watch?
Right.
And it just, the staying power of those Cronenberg films, the imagery, the things, he took horror in such a weird direction.
But in the case of Rabbit, it has such a definitive ending, that shot of just taking your heroin. We've been following her, and she's the disease carrier. She's the one that's giving it to everybody. So it's like, so a slow motion shot of her being thrown into a garbage pail was a pretty strong ending.
Roger Corman, Mask of Red Death. Are you a fan of that movie?
Yeah. The Mask of the Red Death is my favorite of the Poe movies.
Even more so than Pit and the Pendulum.
Yeah, the other one, I'm a big fan of Roger Corman. I'm not the biggest fan of the Poe films. They seem too set bound. They seem too creaky. They seem too dusty, with the exception of Mask of the Red Death. I think that actually was probably, at least for what Corman wanted to do, I think it was his biggest budget. The Secret Invasion might have had more money for that, but compared to the other Poe movies, his visual scheme was able to explode on Mask of the Red Death. It doesn't look cheap. It's not set bound as the rest of them. Lots of extras. He's able to kind of explode his visual sense. He's got Nicholas Roeg as his cinematographer. And Vincent Price is playing much more sinister and realistic than he is in the other ones. It's like, as far as like the Vincent Price performances in those type of monster movies, not the fun ones, but those type of monster movies, it's like there is performance in Mask of the Red Death where he's just, you can't believe how sadistic he is. And then there's his character in Witchfinder General.
Yeah, his Matthew Hopkins is amazing in Witchfinder General.
And then, but the fact that like the plague is a thing in the movie is a big deal. Actually, the movie that dealt with the Black Plague the best, as far as I was concerned, isn't a horror film. It's James Clavell's movie, The Last Valley, with Michael Caine and Omar Sharif. That was a movie where they're all dealing with the Black Plague. And I remember I was like a little, I was like 6 or something when I saw it with my stepdad, and I was like, what is that? What are they talking about? Well, son, you see, it's about, there was this time, there's this disease called the Black Plague, and it killed half the people on the planet. And oh, really, huh? And so I found that whole thing terribly frightening. That movie, The Last Valley, just because it deals with the Black Plague in such a serious way, that movie ended up being a completely terrifying movie to me.
I never saw it. I got to see it.
Now,
I got to see it.
Another movie, speaking of like diseases, this is not a disease movie, but the way the mythology of horror is presented, it almost feels like a disease movie. Not even that disease movies were a thing back then. But the way vampirism is treated in House of Dark Shadows is very similar to what a zombie bite does. Or the way in Rabbit, somebody gets bitten and now they've got this disease and now they're not who they were. Now, I saw that when it came out in 1970. Now, look, I hadn't seen that many horror films by that point in time, obviously. But I have since then. And vampires and vampirism wasn't treated exactly the way it was treated in House of Dark Shadows until House of Dark Shadows. It seemed like Dan Curtis went out to just completely blow Hammer out of the water. And I kind of think they did. There's actually a lot of Hammer movies that I like more than House of Dark Shadows. House of Dark Shadows actually ends up being a little cheesy by the very end, but it did seem new, and it seemed incredibly graphic, and it was also really hip, and it was fun. It was hip in the way that the Hammer films weren't hip. In fact, I really do think Dracula AD 1972 is their way to try to do House of Dark Shadows. That was their way to hip up their movies after House of Dark Shadows. But being a little kid, you were just surprised at how this character is now turned into a vampire, and this character is turned into a vampire, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one. And they're all able to be duplicitous. You don't know that they're a vampire until they, go like that. Mm-hmm. You said you were going to meet me over there. Yes, I know, but the thing happened. But you need to help me because Jeannie needs your help. Where? Which this way? It's not a disease movie, but vampirism is treated as if it is a disease.
As if it's a disease.
I mean, it's actually treated so much as if it's a disease. There's a doctor there trying to cure Barnabas Collins of his vampirism. And it's working. It's a disease to be cured.
You're not turned into a creature of the night. And it's basically like, it's a different way of dealing with it, but it's what I saw in Abel Ferrara's The Addiction, treating it as the metaphor for drug addiction.
But it's interesting. House of Dark Shadows, I don't think plays it as a metaphor. It's just a slightly different way of looking at vampirism in total.
And on a technical level.
So I don't think it's a metaphor. I think it's just a different way of looking at it, and becomes a much more modern way. The movie actually seems, nowadays you look at it, the movie seems really hip, but now when you go back to 1970 when it was made, it's really hip. Forget about the fact that also that was such a successful TV show. The TV show was still on the air when they did it. And he basically, he doesn't just tell another weird story with these characters. He retells the entire story he's been telling for the last 3 years on television. That's already a smash. He just retells it like in 2 hours. He takes, like, if you watch House of Dark Shadows, you would watch it for 3 weeks to see what happens in the first 15 minutes. House of Dark Shadows. That's 3 weeks in episodes, Monday through Friday. But he pulls it together. He does a pretty amazing job of taking the mythology that he spent 3 years doing and boiling it down into one movie. While the show is still on the air.
Oh, while it was on TV.
It was still on the air, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Everybody knew who Barnabas was. It was crazy, the pop cultural significance that Barnabas Collins had in 69 and 70. As a little boy, I knew who Barnabas was. You couldn't go into a head shop store without a Barnabas Collins poster. Right next to Peter Fonda as Captain America and Dennis Hopper as Billy the Kid riding their motorcycles. Right next to McQueen on his bike from Great Escape was always a Barnabas poster.
Train to Busan.
Yeah.
Zombie movie, infection movie. What do you think? Is it a zombie movie or an infection movie? I mean, it's kind of both, but I think it could probably fall into either category.
I think it's both. The infection, it's a zombie movie. They're dead. They're not sick. They're dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they kill the deer at the beginning and he comes back to life, okay, no, they're zombies.
Point of that is sort of experiencing this thing that's coming at you.
Yeah.
Like the pandemic is. The zombies are actually particles approaching you in a way.
Right. So I think, so it's like, it's but also, it's not a disease. It's not a disease. It's like a nerve gas. So it's like a weapon. A weapon kills you and then reanimates you.
It's like a bioweapon, yeah.
It's a bioweapon.
Wreck is another movie that crosses that line between infected.
Oh, by the way, have you seen the terrible sequel to it?
Wreck 2? No.
No, I'm not talking about Wreck. No, the sequel to Train to Busan.
Peninsula?
It's terrible.
Oh, no, it's terrible.
Terrible.
No.
And it looks like it cost 5 times what Train to Busan cost.
God, it was such a brilliant film, the first one. Such a perfect movie.
Terrible. And not only is it terrible, he's trying to make Mad Max Fury Road. But a bad Mad Max Fury. So it's Mad Max Train to Busan.
Train to Busan was probably one of the only movies I've really, really cried very heavily in.
Oh, no, I love Train to Busan. I actually showed it to a couple of friends in Tel Aviv who had never seen it before. And one of them was like, I don't know if I've ever seen a horror film this intense.
I know. It's one of the movies probably the most, because there's so many people on the train to set up, and you know who everyone is, and you know what all their relationships are. And then that businessman that they lock out, like, is still nice to him, and that just the way they set up the dynamics and having to get from one car to the other.
Yeah.
And then the ending, the way the shadow he falls, and then you think, are the soldiers going to shoot the little girl when they're walking? And like, oh my God, they might do this.
No, just that image of the father carrying the little girl running with like seemingly 1,000 infected people chasing him, like right on his ass. Yeah, with that music, boom, 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 boom. That's just complete adrenaline.
It is interesting how that genre, you think it's all been done, and you think it's been done before, and then a movie like Train to Busan comes out, and you just go, oh yeah, they just...
Yeah, no.
I've never seen anything like it.
I thought when Train to Busan came, you're the one that turned me on to it. When Train to Busan came out, I was like, there's no way I can watch another zombie movie or infected people movie. I just can't do it anymore. And I was wrong.
Would you say, I mean, Raw is a cannibal movie, but is that a disease movie? Is that an infected, or is that an inheritance movie? Julie Ducournau's Raw, the French film, they almost treat cannibalism as a disease.
Yeah.
And those scenes in the veterinarian school, they're trying to treat it by eating the animal meat, and it's not working. And the guy wanting to feed the leg. And then when she sees the video of herself and she's in that state, just chomping at the flesh, and the guy peeling up his shirt. Raw was one of my favorite films.
I was doing a list with some friends the other day. Raw I think is one of the top 5 best movies made by a millennial.
Yeah. Well, I told John Watts he was on the list. He was very happy. He really appreciated that.
That's the cop car, right?
Yeah, cop car. And Spider-Man Homecoming. Dr. Sleep, Mike Flanagan, Haunting a Hill House.
I love that movie. I almost don't want to talk about it because I just taped off a television. Apparently on cable, they're showing an extended cut of it.
But that's the one to see.
Of Dr. Sleep.
Yeah, it's like 2.5 hours long, and I don't remember it. I saw it at the theaters. I don't remember it being 2.5 hours long.
Because basically the theatrical version cuts out a lot of Ewan McGregor's performance of his recovery from alcoholism. And that's the best part.
Well, I really liked it at the theater, so I'm very happy to see another half hour.
Well, tell me what you thought. This is great. Like I loved it. I mean, The Shining is another one of those movies that everyone thought was untouchable. How dare you make a sequel? Then he writes a book, and I loved Dr. Sleep.
Yeah, I thought Dr. Sleep was like terrific. Like I will admit that it hasn't stayed with me the way I think a classic horror film should. But when I was in the movie theater watching it, I was loving it. Now, a lot of people say that it falls apart once they get to the Overlook. I don't think it falls apart. It's not as good as it had been up until that point. I don't think it falls apart. I think it sneaks by. But then the coda at the end is so good. The coda with the little girl at the end rightens it. I mean, but the whole thing with Mike Flanagan, though, is I think he's drastically the best horror filmmaker to come out in the last decade. But as far as his movies are concerned, he has yet to do one movie that takes it from the beginning to the end as a satisfied movie. You can always tell he does these straight to video movies like a Cultist or a Ouija 2. And then the first 45 minutes are so good. You're like, wow, this is so much better. And then he reminds you it's a straight to video sequel in the last 20 minutes because it can only be so good. And so I was hoping that Dr. Sleep would be the one that takes it from beginning to end. And he still has yet to do that. He did it with his miniseries. He did it with The Haunting of Hill House. But even in that one, the last episode was the least of its episodes. It was still good. It was still the least episode. But I think it's a magnificent miniseries, The Haunting of Hill House. I think what he did with that is fantastic. I love all of his movies, but he has yet for me to pull it off all the way to the very end. But when I was in the theater, I loved Dr. Sleep.
I thought Rebecca Ferguson was
I liked her. I liked her character a lot.
She was great. I read the book after I saw the movie, and I like it. Sort of.
How's the book?
I could play the movie. The book is good, and there's a really good audiobook that's really terrific that I got through really fast.
I'm willing to bet that the movie's better than the book.
I like the book because I heard Ewan McGregor, and I heard saw Rebecca Ferguson, and I saw Abra. Like I read it after I saw the movie, so I could play the movie while I was listening to it and picture it like. Now I remember scenes in the book as if they were in the movie.
Well, that's really that's pretty cool though that you like the movie so much that drove you to read the book.
Yeah, and the first half of the book is it's really faithful to the book up until you get to the Overlook, basically.
Oh, okay.
Where, of course, the Overlook was blown up.
Yeah.
I'm actually interviewing Mike Flanagan next week for this.
Oh, yeah. I'm a big fan.
I don't know if I've ever been so terrified by the end of a movie as Philip Kaufman's Invasion of the Body Snatchers the first time I saw it. In terms of last shots of a film and the whole thing in San Francisco.
Well, it's interesting. That movie's been remade a bunch of times, but I pretty much like all the remakes. I like Don Siegel's original. I like Philip Kaufman's San Francisco self-help guru one, and I like Abel Ferrara's one a lot. But it was interesting. I was showing a girlfriend the Philip Kaufman version. And so I kind of explained to her the mythology of the Body Snatchers. We watched the movie and she really liked it. Then a little bit later, I showed her the original with Don Siegel, the Don Siegel one. And she really liked that too. So again, I'm having a situation where I'm kind of introducing this movie and this kind of famous horror film science fiction mythology to somebody who wasn't familiar with it, and she really responded. But having seen both of those movies quite a few times, watching them anew, and watching them through somebody else's eyes, I saw something this last time in both versions that I'd never seen before. But I don't think I'm ever going to do this. I might hire somebody to write it or I might produce it, but I don't think I'm ever going to direct it, but I thought about it. In watching it this last time, both movies, I actually think the pod people maybe get a bad rap. The movies treat the pod people as sinister. But there's not really anything they do in the movie that comes across as overtly sinister. It's pretty much almost like Starship Troopers. It's a very human being specific sense of speciesism to look at them in an evil way. Here's the deal. If you think that the pod people are killing the humans and replacing them, if you think they're committing murder, well, that's one thing. But, by the way, flowers, vines, weeds, they do that with other living plant life. They do it with trees. Trees will do it with something else. Something grows out of something else. In nature, that happens all the time. That's what they are. They're vegetables. But most of us probably consider that it's our consciousness is what makes us who we are, not this undefinable thing called soul, which sounds more like something a poet would talk about than anybody really would talk about. It's my knowledge. It's the things that I filled my head with. It's the things that I've cared about. It's the things that I learned, the things that I studied. It is my consciousness that makes me who I am. Well, when the pod people replace you, your consciousness goes on. Everything you ever learned, everything you've ever known is passed on to the pod people. The only thing you don't have are human emotions. Now, the first movie and the second movie tried to present that as a bad thing. Oh, you don't have human emotions. They don't cry. They don't feel sad. They don't laugh. No one's laughing. Well, yes, that's one way to look at it. But then there's also a whole lot of other horrible human emotions that have made the world horrible. Well, they don't have them either. And that's never talked about. The pod people are simply trying to exist, and they work together, and they work together as a unit. The pod people don't have emotions. And so, like, for instance, in the Donald Sutherland version, there's never any vengeance on their part towards Donald Sutherland. They just want to turn him. It doesn't matter how many pod people he's killed up until now. It doesn't matter what a problem it is. They capture him, but they're never like, we're going to teach you a lesson. No, they just want him to assimilate. They just want to assimilate. They want to be one. I thought what would be a good movie would be not another remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but a sequel to Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but a sequel to the Don Siegel one. So it's the 50s. Mm-hmm. And the spores, or whatever they are they landed in two places. They landed in that place in apparently Northern California. That is where the Don Siegel movie's taking place at. But they also landed somewhere in Mississippi in the 50s, in a brutally segregated area in Mississippi, where the black folks are subjugated, heavy Klan activity there. There's the black folks shanty town. There's the richer white folks area, and there's heavy Klan population going on. A lot of the women in the black community work as domestics for the richer white people, in the houses of the richer white people. And the spores land there. And now both rich white folks and poor black folks are getting turned into pod people. And what do? They all work together. Now, all of a sudden, the woman who's the maid for the banker's family and the grand dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, his wife gets turned into a pod person. That black maid gets turned into a pod person. Now they're seen in town conspiring with each other. And then it becomes more, and it becomes more, and it becomes more. And all the racial hatred, all the animus, all the bigotry goes away, because that's not what the pod people are about. So in there, the humans are the bad guys.
Such an interesting idea.
Everything that's everything that's made a big deal about what a crime, what a loss it is in the first movie is what a blessing it is. And the pod people actually do it. They turn over the town. And then it becomes a big deal in the media. Oh my God, this town that had this horrible Klan situation going on and brutal crimes. And now all of a sudden everybody's working together and everybody lives in the same place and it's all going along. And apparently it's affecting even some of the neighboring communities too.
So everyone's getting along. This goodwill is spreading.
This wonderful goodwill. Where is this coming from? This is amazing, magnificent. See? Look at what us humans can do when we put our minds to it.
I think I think you should do that.
I don't want to direct that and everything, but it's I think it should be made in black and white. It should be made literally like it's a Invasion of the Body Snatchers Part 2. So it's a direct sequel to the Kevin McCarthy movie.
To the Don Siegel one. Awesome.
And then it ends with like one of the horrible Klan guys actually finally escapes from the town, and he escapes. He doesn't get caught, but he's like, they're not real. They're coming to get you. It's like he's like Kevin McCarthy, except he's this horrible villain.
It's a great.
They're going to get you. They're going to get you.
It's a brilliant observation. And they're going to get you, and they're going to make you all get along with each other. Just one of the greatest.
All right, we're so good. Dude, you're the best.
Cool.
Fucking nobody contextualizes it. No, there's just nobody that like does the stuff like you. It's just so awesome. The fans are gonna see it, and
oh, thank you.
It's such a pleasure. And the fans are people are gonna get so much out of it.